now. And a lot of people are very confused about what's right or wrong at this point. And to make it kind of short here, I think the crypto space can be an incredibly valuable and freeing thing for the world, but only if it's used right. And we'll get into that. But I just want to say I totally understand that some people think this might be a very dangerous thing.
I can agree with that. With cryptocurrency, I think there's been a real fear put out there of cryptocurrency, and there's always been this sort of sidetrack in human consciousness as by what's in it for me. Like I said, most people vote with their pockets. Most people I've found have looked at crypto and they've sort of gone, you know, how much money can I make out of crypto? They've not looked at what crypto could be used for. And at the moment, we've got a window that if everybody were to pull all their money out of the bank and put it into crypto wallets and run off that, we could actually gain control of the system. But while everyone's worried about making money and what's in it for me and what should I invest in, and looking at it as something like a stock exchange and personal profit, they're missing the bigger picture of what it could be used for to completely circumvent and deactivate the banking system. But while they're all arguing about all this stuff and in this fear, the IoT is being built over the top, which is what the crypto people, a lot of the crypto people I hear have this dream in their head that we're moving into the world like the Jetsons or something, you know? But you know, everything's just going to be fantastic when it's all crypto. But they're not seeing the IoT and social crediting and all the stuff that's being built over the top, which in that world, it doesn't matter what currency you use as long as it's digital, because it isn't going to be the currency that determines your purchasing power. It's going to be your social profile. And if you can't buy an airline ticket because of a post you put on Facebook back in 1996, then it doesn't matter how much crypto you've got in your wallet. But people are missing the window that crypto is providing to actually deactivate the banking system and thereby deactivate the government. You see what I mean? That's the way I've looked at all this. It's all been misconstrued. There's all these agents that get in there and they infiltrate and they start arguments over details, and people don't see the bigger picture of what the crypto people have actually tried to do with cryptocurrency. And like I said, unfortunately, there's an element within the crypto world that still can't see the bigger picture, that are just focused on what this dream is that they've got, and they want to hold on to that. And they're going to be really shocked when that bubble bursts and social crediting is introduced into their country. But at the same time, you look at what we can do with this technology. What Luke brought to the table with what they're doing in China, with this coordinated protest and stuff. So what we can do with this blockchain stuff and these apps and all this stuff, what we can do with this smart technology if we use it sensibly. But at the moment, unfortunately, the world's run by criminals. You know, so we've got a bit of a problem there. But you know, like I said in the talk yesterday, what this whole movement is about is freedom. And it isn't even a truth movement. That is even a co-opted term that's been put in there, because what is the truth? The truth is subjective. The truth is we don't know what the truth is, because we don't have the freedom to find out. And it's establishing freedom, and crypto is providing this window for us to do that if we're sensible and we look at it from through the right set of eyes.
Yeah, what I'd add to that is that the people who have been controlling the world for a long time control it through a few different means. They control it through information, which the internet has, everything's a double-edged sword. So in some ways, DARPA was involved in the internet, and Al Gore says he created the internet. That's hilarious. But even if they were involved, some of us have taken it and used it to spread information, and we're still doing that. You do that as well. And they're trying to shut us down, but there's always ways around it. The second way that they control most of the people on this earth is through the money system. And we can get into what money is or if it's good or bad. I think in general it's good, but just like anything, it can be used for good or bad. They've mostly been using it for very bad. They've been extorting most of the world and stealing most of the money for a long time and using it to blow up people, to regulate and to control people. The double-edged sword is we can also use it for good. And what you said, Max, and I totally agree, is we do have this window right now. But what it's going to take is for people to start really using crypto, and that's a whole other topic that it'd take a long time to talk about. Not just Bitcoin, but things like Monero. If enough people truly want freedom, we can take away their power. And we won't actually have power, but we'll take away their power. If there wasn't crypto, if crypto did not exist, and this is 2019, I'd already be living in a forest. I'd probably be a lot more like Mark Passio. I'd be like, I'm just going off the grid. But I see there's an opportunity. Unfortunately, a lot of people still don't know what's going on. But there is enough of us now that if we start to use these things, we can take away all their power. Because you talk about the social credit system and all that. The biggest problem with anything is government. So if there is a government, which is a criminal organization, and they can use these things, they can really enslave us even more. However, if we really realize our own power and start to use systems outside of their systems, we can take away a lot of their power.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. So that's the answer to the first question.
How about that for the first question? Give them guys a round of applause. That was fucking amazing. You got one? All right, I guess my second question is, so that was sort of like a look at the macrocosmic problem that we're facing in the world, externalities. Now let's take a look at the microcosm, or the internalities of what we deal with in this situation, and how our internal states need to function, change, improve, grow to maintain to create a utopia within our own personal lives. What can you guys touch on as far as your personal developments and how you've been able to use that to create a more free life for yourself and maybe your friends and family?
Easy questions. Well, I would say that I think we all create our own reality. And so as kind of an interesting thing is that many of the times that we're talking about all these problems, we're actually pretty good. Like, you're okay, I'm okay, you guys are okay, no one's dying right now. Like, I think we kind of focus, whatever we focus on, we actually create. So what I would say is, and I think you mentioned a word, was it oasis or utopia? Here's the thing, there's no utopia. Life is about ups and downs and rounds, and it's very brightly colored. Someone said that, Bill Hicks. I think we're always going to have problems, but it's how we deal with them. I'm not even sure what the question was exactly. Utopia. But what I would say is, if you're sitting there and you're very worried and you're very fearful about what's going on, you're going to have a bad time. But if you're not, if you can figure out how to not be that way, you will actually create a world around you that won't be all that bad. Like, I could even be in a jail cell at this point. I'd probably smuggle in some drinks, maybe some cigarettes. But I wouldn't be all that bad, because I've started to understand that what you focus on, what you think about, actually becomes reality. So if enough of us start to think about and focus on good ways, good solutions to change the world, we absolutely can. And crypto is a big part of that.
Okay, I think it was about something like that, and personal development, and yeah. Well, as I said in my talk yesterday, life is an emotional mirror, and that's how we create our own reality. And my life was a train wreck up until I realised that. It really was. I mean, I was my own worst enemy for most of my life. I couldn't figure out why I couldn't function. It's because I had a stake in the outcome of everything. And why would you have a stake in the outcome of this life? You're only here for a breath. What do you really care what happens to the human species, really? I mean, I just do what I do because I could see that there's a better way of doing things, and I'm trying to point that out to people. I think there's kind of an easy way out of this if people could just realise the value that they have. And it's realising that personal value in yourself and beginning and learning to love yourself enough to love others unconditionally. Because really there's only one of us here, if you want to look at it that way. It's just one consciousness experiencing itself subjectively, like Bill Hicks said. That's what it's all about. And the thing is, people have a stake in the outcome of everything. And you've got to be able to expect the unexpected, because you don't know what's going to happen. A plane could fall out of the sky and land on this building any minute, we don't know. You wouldn't know, a truck could come barreling through the wall. You just don't know what's going to happen
Like the
next.
Kool-Aid man.
Yeah, you just don't know. Anything could happen, It could be an earthquake. You just don't know what's around the corner. The only thing that's impossible is that which you believe is impossible. And it's those moments of disappointment and all this stuff because we've got a stake in the outcome. And as I said in my talk yesterday, what you've got to be able to do, the trick to getting through life is to be able to face infinity without flinching. It's just all part of the ride. And I've said that same thing. If I was in jail, it's just part of the next chapter. If something happens, it's just part of the next chapter. It's what you do with the information. Because there is no place of enlightenment. There is no area that you're going to get to where you're suddenly sitting on top of a hill wearing robes, all glowing, saying, yes, I got there. The journey is the place. It's what you do with the information along the way. So it's just a matter of processing it. It's sometimes people's failure to process different forms of light because they see that as dark information. That's negative information. All information is light. That's what enlightenment is. It's a breaking down of everything you thought was true, and it's this bringing light to that darkness. It's just people's failure to process certain forms of light. They call it negative. It's simply information. And now you have that information, perhaps you can heal that problem, because you certainly can't heal it without the information to begin with. So, it's just coming to terms with this sort of stuff. That's how I do it anyway. That's my play through this field anyway.
We started this conversation on the subject of crypto, and you mentioned things like social crediting and obviously the mass surveillance that goes on all the time. But at the same time, none of us would probably be here without the internet and utilizing these technological advancements as well. Like if the internet was created by the Defense Department, this is still a good result of that. No matter how you look at it. So I guess the question is, how do we utilize and how do we view technologies, whether they're cryptocurrency, the internet? How do we walk that tightrope where we get their benefits, we spread our message, we utilize them for all the good that they can bring without becoming vulnerable to, I guess, being controlled by these said technologies?
Super easy questions, thank you. Well, sort of like what I said, though, is everything's a double-edged sword. You can use anything for good or for bad. And what is good or bad, right? This is, it's a very funny place that we've been put in here. I don't understand it. It seems very dualistic. Like, for example, if everything was always perfect, if we lived in heaven, we're on the top of the mountain, as you said, we wouldn't even know we were there because there'd be no way to understand it unless we understood that there was something worse, right? So this is a very strange video game that, however you want to describe it, that we're in. If the question is, if you're worried about, oh, crypto's going to enslave us more, only you can enslave yourself. If you feel enslaved, if you feel worried, you've actually created that, in my opinion. However, we do live in this world, and there's a bunch of real fucked up people, sociopaths, whatever you want to call them. They want to control everybody. And if you want to stop that, the way is to use things outside of their control. And in many ways, well, crypto, I'll just say this, crypto came from the cypherpunks. 80s and 90s. You say yes or no? Do you want to say anything about that?
I think we're still investigating a little bit of that. Maybe
Sure. Yeah, I don't.
1995,
Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't, unless I saw it with my own eyes, I don't believe it. However, I know a lot of these cypherpunks. Paul Rosenberg, for example, a lot of you probably don't know him. He's an amazing man. He's going to be speaking in Acapulco. We haven't announced yet, but he was around, and he said it was a bunch of basically anarchists on who, before the internet even existed, knew where this was going, and they said we need to find a way to take the money system and take it away from anyone being able to control it. That's my understanding of it. Now, just like the internet, you know, DARPA was involved. Al Gore created it, sure. There's actually millions of people all doing stuff. But how many people here would say the internet has negatively affected their life or positively? Let's say negative. No one. Positive? Almost everyone, yeah. So even if they created it, if you're what I would consider a good person, we can use it for our own uses. And it would be the same for crypto.
I can understand that. There's the problem, if you look at the social crediting system and how it works, it's not necessarily the technology, it's how we use the technology. There's certain aspects of it. The way we're doing the trade-off between real-world skills for convenience via technology. We're not just using the technology for communication, we're not just using it for making videos and getting the message out and all that sort of stuff. We're using all these little apps to do things for us. We're getting little smart devices. We're getting smart devices to open our homes and open our cars, and we're letting everything go that direction, and we're losing our life skills in that process. And that's where the control aspect of it comes into it. We're being led into this. I'm trying to stop the peas popping. It's because there's no dust cover. It's because it's a 57. 58's better. 58's better. I'm a sound engineer. This is a good snare drum, Mike.
Yeah, I know.
But it's the trade-off between convenience, you know, that we're having with all this smart grid that's going with the technology. You know, it's our willingness to give our general life skills away to the technology that is the problem, and that's how it controls us. Because once it gets to the point that, you know, you've got a smart lock on your car, and you've got people can't even find their way around their own cities anymore without a GPS and without a little map and without all this stuff. You know, and it's all getting moved onto the phone, and then the phone, all your license will be moved onto your phone eventually. So when the cops pull you over for a random breath test, they won't ask to see your license and registration, they'll ask to see your phone. And your phone will have your entire social profile on it. They'll know whether you're a person of interest or not. And the reason that's happening is because we're trading off all our life skills for all this technology, and everyone's glued to these devices. You could still use the crypto, you can still use the internet. The internet's had a positive effect on my life. I wouldn't be here speaking to you without the internet. But it's also, I've seen it, when you look at where it comes from, DARPA and CERN, the original application of it was a military application. What is the internet? The international net. What is the World Wide Web? What do you do with the net? What do you do with the web? You catch things. Why did they make 9/11 so obvious? Why did they start the truth movement? Why do they let us do what we do? Why have they now started bringing in censorship on the internet to turn it into us and them? To segregate everybody so that we can't even get our message out to them anymore, so then we can just start disappearing. And this is happening again because of the way people are giving away their general life skills for these phone apps that are doing all this stuff. And even with the social crediting system, the way it works in China, the way they're bringing it in Darwin and Australia, is they track what apps you're using and where you're using them. That's how they track what you're doing. It's all these little apps and all this stuff. That's the problem. See, it's a double-edged sword. The internet's got a lot of huge benefits, but we've got to see this trade-off. We can't give our life skills away. We can't let it go cashless. We can't let it all go digital. We can't allow digital locks. We can't allow I was talking to someone here today, they wanted to show me some information they had, but they didn't have it because it's on the cloud. And they can't access the cloud because they don't have their password or something, whatever, Well, what's it doing on the cloud? What is the cloud? My information's on the cloud, is it? It's not in the filing cabinet over there anymore. It's on the cloud. And if I don't do what I'm told, I get locked out of access to the cloud because I've done the trade-off and put it all through these apps. Right? I don't keep it in the filing cabinet anymore. So that's where the problem is. So that's how we use the tech, by just being aware of what we're using the tech for and what aspects of the tech we're using. This is supposed to be a communication system, not a mass convenience system where we can just ask Alexa to deliver the next case of beer and a hooker, This is what we've become, for God's sake, That's what it's all about. Just give me my TV and my hooker and my case of beer, it's all good. It'll go away. The news will tell me Max will fix the world, I'll hold his coat and I'll get the newsletter that it's safe to go outside now. Jeff's saved the world, he's introduced crypto, it's all good. I can go back to my fucking slave job and do the same things I was doing every fucking day, because the world's changed now. I never did anything about it. I can still use the tech, And it's dopamine addiction, folks, is how they've done it. It's dopamine addiction, because every time you click an icon, it's a little dopamine release. I know people, they're just scared to put their phones down. And that's how they're leading you into it. They make it convenient, and then they get to the point where they say, okay, well, if you don't do what you're told, we're going to cut you out of this, and you won't be able to access your bank account or your house or your car or a train ticket or a plane ticket or anything, because you were using all of this stuff rather than looking at the map and going there and finding your way yourself and doing all this stuff yourself, So we've got to look at it, folks. It's a fine line how we're being led into this path. So it's just awareness of what. I don't own a smartphone, by the way. I don't own a smartphone. I don't own a credit card. I'm 62 years old, and I seem to get through pretty okay. So, yeah.
All right. Well, I think now's a good time to open it up to you guys. Does anybody have any questions they want to ask the two gentlemen? All right. We got Chuck over here. You got a wireless mic coming to you. And here you go, Max. Vocal mic.
Can I get the white wine, by the way?
All right. What do you want, the white light?
White wine.
White wine.
You guys hear me all right? Yeah. All right. What are the most exciting projects that you guys are seeing right now that's addressing these problems that you're bringing up?
What do you see? I'm seeing a lot of action in the 5G front. In Australia, I am anyway. I'm seeing a lot of on-the-ground action. 5G and the rollout of the smart grid. People are seeing that it's the health aspects of it. They're seeing the social crediting aspects of it. The problem with 5G is it's a targeted wave. With 4G, it's like the G is generation as well, and with 4G it's just an ambient wave. But with 5G, it's like you make a phone call, bang, wave goes directly to you, so you're targeted. And when you look at DARPA technology and active denial systems and military-grade technology, this is a weapons system. Communication is a side thing. It's a bonus that you can do with this weapons system. But it's basically a weapons system. I'm seeing a lot of action against that in my own community in Australia and around the world. So That's a positive thing because they need the 5G carrier wave to run the Internet of Things, and the Internet of Things will be checkmate if they manage to put the Internet of Things in place and get 5G up and running everywhere. That will be checkmate for the crypto world, because like I said, it won't matter what the currency is if it's as long as it's digital. That's all they need. So we've got a window here, and we really need to embrace this window. And I'm with Jeff. I'd like to see everybody use crypto right now and embrace this window and pull the rug out from under them before they've got a chance to roll this out. Because if we debate about it for another year or two, it's going to be too late. We've got a very, very short window to turn this around. So I am seeing positive action on it though, with 5G anyway. Jeff?
Is that a proponent? Are you saying you want 5G to roll out?
No, I don't want 5G rolled out. We're stopping it being rolled out. There's a lot of action to stop it in Australia. Oh, absolutely. Like we're seeing it as an assault. We've got great criminal codes. The way we're doing it, we're using the criminal code of each state, find out what constitutes an assault in your state. Because in a normal democratic society, you're entitled to quiet enjoyment in the comfort of your own home. That's what constitutes being a free person, you know, freedom in the pursuit of happiness, you know. So if you can't live in your home in quiet enjoyment of your life because you're in fear of this electronic tower out there that's pumping this signal, well, you're under an assault. And the politician that legislated that telco could put that there is the one who assaulted you. And this is the approach we've been taking, telling the politicians that it's not just going to be the telco, it's going to be you personally who signed off on the legislation allowing this to happen, who will be liable for an assault. And here's a barrister to back up what I just said. And the barrister's going, actually, he's right, and you're fucked. And the politicians are going, well, we'll just deny that application for the telco. And they're stopping the rollout. I mean, they're really pushing. Telstra is still pushing to do it, but we're pushing back, and there's a big movement to stop it. So,
Yeah, I believe that there's definitely a nefarious force here that is trying to kill most people.
that's comforting. Just break it to them gently.
It's happening.
Just
However,
break it to them gently, you know.
Well, you got to say what's happening, right? And you look at Georgia Guidestones, reduce the world population by 95%. Vaccines, fluoridization, chemtrails, taking away the nutrition, big pharma. It's obvious. But we don't have to be a part of that. In some ways, I have to say, well, I have two things to say. One is, if you thought I was going to argue with Max, you're wrong. Max is totally right on everything he said. I might have some different viewpoints on maybe how we can use these technologies to do different things, but in general, I've almost come to the point where if there was a bar and some cute girls in the forest, I would just go live in the forest at this point. Yeah. And I say that because I've started to realize that all these external things, and actually I'm just joking about the bar and the cute girl, well, the bar. But all these external things can never make you completely happy like you can actually do to yourself. So as much as, for some reason, we're here on this prison planet, as Alex Jones might say, and as Max talks about all the time, and he's right, we can still be pretty good. If there's anything that they can ever take away from you, then you've already lost. What I've learned in the last few years is if you just understand, that's a funny word, by the way. That's what the police always say. They go, do you understand? It's actually a magic trick. They say, do you stand under me? And if you say yes, then you go to the rape camps. And if you say no, you don't. But what I've started to understand is the most happiness, the best things actually are not anything external. However, we do live in a place and we care about a lot of people, and I do. I care about a lot of people. And I don't understand why we're here, but we can totally fuck this system up. We can. It's not even that hard. Just hit like on some videos some fucking times, man. Like really, it's human action. As Mises said, there's not enough people actually doing something. And it could be just hitting like on a video. How many likes do you get on yours? Like probably like 10%, 5% of the viewers? Yeah, so what are the rest of the 90% doing? They won't even hit like. Well, they just decided how they want the world to be. Everyone has power. Everyone. So if you want this place to be good, it's as easy as clicking like, getting involved, speaking out. And if we don't, it's not going to be so good.
Awesome. Do we have another question from the audience? Hey.
I actually want to slightly push back on something that you said, Jeff. And by push back, I just want to examine it. You made the statement that you believe, and I think a lot of people who here also believe, that there's some sort of nefarious force that's, trying to do harm to humanity. I personally am conflicted, and I go back and forth with my beliefs in this, and whether that nefarious force is some sort of globalist, Illuminati, conspiracy, whatever you want to call it, or if it's human nature. I mean, it's very, you name some things like, that from Big Pharma or whatever that seem to be evidence of that, and that could be, but it could also be evidence of just the selfishness and, non-compassion of man to his fellow man. So, I don't know, how do you, I just want you to justify that point, or maybe just examine it a little bit, because it's kind of, I don't know, you can kind of draw answers from things sometimes. Not you, just we all can. And I want to make sure that sometimes our echo chambers, we kind of take certain things as a matter of fact without maybe discussing them a little further. So, was that too convoluted of a question? A little bit?
So many easy questions. Thank you so much. What is the meaning of life?
42.
You want answers? Do you have any? Well, I think I kind of just said it, right? My belief at this moment in time, and I could be crazy as hell, is we make of this world what we want to make of this world. And you mentioned the dark side and the light side. In my opinion, this whole Satan and God sort of thing, I think Satan's sort of the ego, and God is sort of realizing you're not just this vessel. I could be totally wrong. We might all end up in concentration camps in like 2 years. But if I'm there, I'll be okay. I think for some reason, let's think about this, right? I'll just mention this. If you were an incredibly intelligent being, like a god or a creator of something, that could create entire worlds, what would you do? I'd probably create something like this, with all the bad guys, all the good guys, you got all your internal struggles, you're all fucked up. And if you look at every single person here has a movie, it's called Your Life. And if you watch it all, and it's like really well directed, it would be such an awesome movie. There's no one here, I'm sure. Has anyone not have anything fucked up happen to them? Yeah. My belief, and I could be crazy as hell, is we're all here to sort of create a movie. But, as I always say, if I'm in this movie, I want to take down those bad guys really bad. Really bad.
Yeah, like, is there a nefarious force or is it us? Is the issue? You know, I mean, a lot of it is us, but a lot of it is due to programming. You can't look at the complexity of the system and not realize that there's something behind it that's been there for a very long time, that's put a certain plan into motion, and all they had to really do was interject the economic system. And it really, when you look at it, I mean, you can get religious about it if you want to, but I can look at all of that as allegorical as well, like I was talking about in my talk with the scrying mirrors and all that sort of stuff. You know, the metaphorical biting of the apple. As soon as you need that information, why do you need it? Why do you need to know all this stuff that you think you need to know? What do you need to know what the stars are made of for? Just enjoy the stars. What do you need to know how old the tree is? You know, we chop it down so we can measure the rings. Well, now you don't have the tree to sit under. Why didn't you just enjoy the freaking tree? You know? We do all this stuff, you know. As soon as we start tearing the earth apart to find out what it's made of, we cease to love it. And we left the path of wisdom. And we started to value information and knowledge over wisdom. You know, so that metaphorical biting of the apple leads to we want to know more and more and more and more about all this stuff. When we get all this information, what do we do with it? You know, and the need for that information creates a need for automation, which creates a need for a monetary system, which creates a need for the internet, which creates a need for all this shit that we've created. So yeah, we create it. It's the moment we stepped off that path of wisdom and started to value knowledge over wisdom. So is there a nefarious force? Is it us? Do we manifest it ourselves? Is this a cyclic thing? Is there human consciousness simply trapped in this loop? And like I was alluding to yesterday, are these scrying mirrors and all these things, all these sigils and all these messages left there to warn us of what happens? We get to the end of the cycle and we give all our power to this system. It takes everything away from us and just leaves us and we get cold and they start again. We've got to get out of that loop. So is there a controlling hand? I mean, maybe. Are they bad or is it us? Maybe. You know, the problem is with wanting to know who they are is that I can prove it's anybody you want. You tell me who you want to blame, whether it's the Jesuits or the Jews or the Freemasons or aliens or whoever, and give me 2 days, I'll prepare a slideshow to convince you that you're completely correct. Because all the information is put out there for me to do that, which is exactly why it's been put out there. Because the truth is we don't know what the truth is. So yeah, we create a lot of this ourselves due to our participation in it, by us stepping outside our moral compass, our tolerance of wrong behaviour, as Marx has tried to drum into people for the last 10 years. You know, it's that simple decision in our mind. You know what's right, you know what's wrong. You don't need anyone to define it for you. Give me a break, you know. We all know what we're fucking doing, but we do it anyway. You know, when you can look at this place as a maybe this is even a test, a soul harvest, and like I said yesterday, it's about how you die, it's about the decision you make. How much are you prepared to be pushed before you say, no, fuck you, I'm not going to do this shit anymore. I have value, I'm going to do something else. I'm actually going to be a nice person and look at this experience and just live my life in the wonderment of life. Life is so freaking awesome, folks. Just how can you not be in awe just at the fact that we can be, this is a single consciousness interacting, and look outside of the trees and the shit and just look at this stuff. Look at what we've got. How can you not be in complete awe every moment of every day? Just the fact that you're alive. Where's the problem? You know, so yeah, I think we do a lot of it ourselves, but yeah, and again, I think there is a controlling hand, but even is that us or is that the AI already? Like I said, I can prove it's anyone you want, you know, but you know, ultimately it's down to the choices we make and the moral compass that we choose to allow to aim us.
Wow, that was awesome. I love you, Max.
I love you too, brother.
Looks like we have another question in the audience. Right here, front row.
Great debate, right? I love these anarchist debates.
I fucking hate you, man. Like
Yeah,
you're so
fucking
wrong,
Max.
you know? You're so wrong. You fool.
I'm going to answer a question that you asked, Jeff, and that's going to lead me to my question for you both. You asked, why don't people put likes on your videos? Because we're
so much of this stuff. I mean, we talk about, you know, Anarchapulco or Arkadelphia. I mean, these are named after your creation, and you are always on video. I mean, listen to your blogs many times. So, what keeps you guys out front and center? What gives you the strength to step out into limelight, the harm's way, perhaps? Give us some perspective of how we should be changing ourselves to not just click a like button, but to really take the next step and be you guys.
This world will change the moment you guys stop having fear. Or hope. What's stopping you from saying your truth? I know what it is. It's the 12 years of government indoctrination camps, 30 years of watching that television programming. When you guys, and a lot of you already have, but anyone watching, when you wake up, it's over. It's fucking over. That's it.
Yeah, look, I just do it because it needs to be done. And I didn't really have a choice. You don't step onto the path of activism or become a dissenter as a career path. It's a good choice, not a good move, folks, if that's what you want to do as a career. But yeah, it's having no stake in the outcome. I live by a philosophy that if you throw yourself to the wind, you can ride it. And I didn't ever plan to do what I'm doing. When I started doing this, I didn't even put my face out there for 4 years. I didn't want anyone to know what I looked like. It wasn't about that, because I never wanted it to be about me. Because, you know, people look at you as some celebrity or something that's going to change the world for them. It's simply the message. And really, all I've said since the beginning is, listen, the world's run by criminals, folks, and we don't have to do this shit. And I've tried to find a million different ways to say that in the hope that I'll reach more and more people to the fact that we don't actually have to do any of this stuff. It's just an idea someone had. And we all went, right, we better do that, no problem. Yes sir, no sir, 3 bags full sir. Somehow we got tricked into that. So yeah, I just do this because it needs to be done. No stake in the outcome. Like I said, it's all part of the journey. I came here to die, it's a given. I'm going to die at some stage. It's just how I do that. Hey man, I crawled into the tunnels into Gaza because I wanted to have a look. I don't really do fear. It's not part of my vocabulary. So, you know, and that's how they control us, is the fear, our belief in authority. And it's all terrorism. It's because that's what the scholastic system is based in, is based in terrorism. You know, terrorism, the original definition of terrorism, if you look at the old dictionaries, it's violence or the threat of violence carried out against civilians as a means of coercion. So anything you're coerced into doing under threat of punishment, that's called terrorism. And that describes the entire scholastic system. So you ever, like Jeff said, 12 years of that shit. Fear, 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 fear. Don't fucking think for yourself. Don't say, you, and most people's biggest fear is public speaking. Most people would prefer to die than have to do public speaking. It's bizarre. I mean, I spent my life on stage playing rock and roll guitaring and shit, so I've kind of really used to people. But like I said, I never planned on doing this. But life took everything away from me. It gave me all the skills I needed and all the information I needed to do this, and then it took everything else away from me and didn't give me any other choice, so here I am. Deal with it. You got to put up with it. I'm good.
Yeah, I like putting up with it. I love your show.
Is there anyone else in the audience with something they'd like to ask the two gentlemen? Oh, all right, get Ken Bozak the mic, son. Over
I
here.
think we were getting a wind-up before too, were we, or were we good?
Huh?
Oh, we're
yeah,
good.
we got
Okay,
time for
cool.
this last
We'll
one.
just go forever. We can do this.
Yeah,
I can
I'm
do
not
this
staying
all
forever.
night.
No.
I can do this. Well, forever is a long time.
Indica or sativa? No. Well, if you give them an easy one.
Sativa. Oh no, indica in the
I like
couch.
indica, yeah, I
I just
mean,
started with my
indica.
coffee enemas. It's fucking
Indica.
awesome. Oh, dude, you haven't done coffee enema?
I'm gonna have to try it with you one day. My
No.
question is, you know, we're here at an anarchist event talking about anarchy, cryptocurrency. I want to know, like, where do you see those roads and bridges meeting, and where is the similarity? Basically, events like this are tuning forks. You know, one solid single wavelength coming from two sides of one instrument, anarchy, crypto. What does that frequency so well?
Well, you clearly smoke weed with that question.
It's all part of the same thing. I mean, crypto could provide anarchy. You know, anarchy being self-governance, which is what it's supposed to be. So it's all part of this. It's not really two different things. But like I said, there's a limited window for that. The problem is people aren't educated enough to understand what true anarchy is. They're not educated enough to govern themselves. You know, we need a transitional period. But what does that look like? You know, it's just a. But I don't think they're coming from two opposite things. I think they're complementing each other, or have the ability to complement each other anyway.
The one thing I want to say, because I've heard this, people going, well, crypto is part of the New World Order. It's CIA and all that. Like I said earlier, the internet there was some DARPA, there was some CERN, there was some status involved, obviously, most of them actually. But what have we turned it into, right? And it's the same with crypto. And actually, Bitcoin has been a bit co-opted. This is a battle. Like, maybe I create it in my own mind, but I'm in a war, but we're also creating other things. And I would say again, Monero, whatever they do, it's like almost, this is life, right? It's like they go so extreme, we'll go so extreme. But anyone who says that crypto in general is a completely statist, collectivist, satanic thing doesn't know crypto. Just like everyone put up their hands when I said if the internet has helped your life. It's totally helped my life. Well, I'm not sure if it's helped my life, but it makes my life more convenient. Truly, the only thing that helps my life is I see my dogs, I see their beautiful eyes, I see my daughter, my wife, good people like Max. We really don't need any of this technology. We don't. We don't. But it's cool, whatever. If they're gonna try to fuck us all, we'll use it the other way.
I have just one closing question for you guys. I've been for a while. I like to ask this to anyone who describes themselves as an anarchist. This is both of you. If you had a magic button in front of you right now, and you could press it and end all governments you know, that means in any way, shape, or form, from the military to municipal trash collection, would you do it? Why or why not?
I'll answer really quickly. No, I wouldn't do it just because it's not about. Because a lot of those things you said, trash collection. That's funny, you know. Like even roads, it's so funny when people go, "What about the roads? If we get rid of government?" It's like, do they disappear? Do they just go away? It's a conscious thing, and we could, if there was a button right there. Donald Trump, Barack Obama, Jeffrey Epstein, Donald Rumsfeld, Dick Cheney. I wouldn't do it. Because I'm not violent. But we just blow them up. If not enough people wake up, they'll just create another one. It's about awakening people to what's really going on. That's the funny thing about anarchy. We're all anarchists here. We're at Anarcho-Delphia. Most of your people on the street think we want to throw Molotov cocktails and kill people. We believe in peace and love. We will never. And I know the sort of anarchist movement, so to speak, like the punk movement, they're like, burn it down, burn it down. Yeah, burn it down, but they'll just rebuild it again. We have to enlighten people. So no, I wouldn't press the button. I would never enforce anything on anyone.
Press the button.
Yeah, I agree. I wouldn't press the button either because, unfortunately, a lot of people aren't ready for self-governance. They're simply not educated enough or competent enough to govern themselves. And the thing with government is just an idea. It isn't real. It only exists in books. You know, the government is a building where people go and they do what it says in the books. You know, people think, oh, the government's coming to get me, or the town hall's going to get up and march over and eat your house. You know, it doesn't exist. It's just an idea. It's a concept. And the moment people understand it's just a concept, it disappears. It only has that power because we give it that power. So, you know, while people out there believe that they need someone to tell them what to do, we need them, you know, that they're not capable of governing themselves. That's the thing. You know, government is simply racketeering. But like you said, people say, well, what about the roads, or what about the garbage? The government didn't build the roads. You don't see politicians out there building roads. They just don't do that shit. Those roads were built by companies, and they're already doing that shit. Then the government said, hey, look what you guys are doing. You got to give us a cut, and you got to build it our way. And everybody who uses it has got to give us a cut for using it. It's classic racketeering. That's all it is. It's racketeering. They go and co-opt all the stuff that we do for society, and they say, okay, we're going to dictate how you do all this shit that you do, and you all got to give me a cut for doing it. And then all you people who use all the stuff they built, they've got to pay me some taxes for using the stuff that you built, because I'm the government, okay? You voted for me, and you're doing things my way now. It's racketeering. And if you don't do it, I'm going to send Jeff around to put you in a cage, and you can pay protection money to,
I'm not
to
gonna
this
do that.
guy.
What are you talking about?
This guy, you know, the taxes. He's a tax collector. He's going to go and you pay protection money to him, so I don't send Jeff around to put you in a cage. That's me being government. That's all it fucking is, folks. It's racketeering, and we need people to wake up to that simple fact that that's what government is. You know, and what we've got here. And what they do is they play everybody off against each other and all the countries off against each other. We think that they're all it's all one group. It's all one big crime family, multinational, multi-generational criminal cabal masquerading as different governments. And the guys from Iran and the guys from America say, we're going into war now, letting you all know we're going to war now, so you guys are going to go and bomb you guys. Now we're not at war now, we'll shake hands. Now you can all go and rebuild all your countries again. It's a fucking scam. The whole thing's one big scam. It's racketeering just to keep everybody in line while they bring in this little smart system and move us all into this whole AI grid they want to do. So, no, I wouldn't do it because the whole thing's a fiction. There is no button that you can press to make people just go, oh shit, I don't have to do this anymore. I've just realized, who the fuck are you people? You know, someone comes and tells you to walk between the lines, no problem, but just for a moment, who the fuck are you? You know, we never asked that. So, yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, Jeff Burrick and Max Igan. Awesome. Well, coming up next, we have one of my personal favorites as well. She is one of the best in the field of independent media. She was involved in the anti-media block for a long time, and now she's branching out on her own, and couldn't be more excited. Carrie Weather.
Yeah, I'm still trying to. Yeah. Trying to jump on.
Oh wait, it's not HDMI? Wait, it's on the side.
I love this. I already love.
I'm gonna cry.
It's in the title. This is awesome. All right, projector on.
Probably, if that's cool. I got a lot going on, so. Can you guys hear me? No? Yeah? Okay, cool. Does it work? Oh my God. Hold on. Is that like centered? Centered, yay. Hi guys. Sorry, there's a little delay. First, I just want to say hi. I hope you guys are all having a good time. I am. I'm going to take things in a different direction now, and I just want to give a disclaimer that I'm probably going to cry. I'm a crier. Don't worry. Do not be alarmed. I'm fine. You can cry with me. We can cry together. It's all good. Don't worry. And with that, I will begin. All right. So I want to start with a question. Have you guys at any can you guys hear me? I feel like I'm such a loud person, and I'm not coming off loud right now. Am I okay? Okay. More? Less? We're good? Okay. Woo, let's go. All right. Question for all of you. At any point in your life, whether you were a statist, whether you are an anarchist, whenever it happened, have you ever just felt not okay? Like depressed, sad, angry, lonely, inadequate, unworthy? Any of them? Raise your hand. Yeah, me too. Cool. All right. Well, we are not alone. Whether you are a hardcore statist, whether you're an anarchist, depression is on the rise, anxiety is on the rise, people are suffering. Oh, my startup disk is full. Oh no, and I can't X out of it. Hold on one second. Wait, there we go. Okay, cool. Yeah, my computer is suffering. Everybody's suffering. I gotta clear it off. Okay. I do want to add the caveat that I do think rates are increasing potentially and partially just because people are more willing to talk about it now. There's less of a stigma, so there's more people opening up about it. That may be affecting the rates, but nonetheless, people are having a hard time. There are a lot of people who feel caught and feel trapped. Now I have a second question. So for those of you who are anarchists, in the time since you have been anarchists, have any of you felt depressed, anxious, angry, any of the above because you're just trying to be free and you are, yes, exactly. You are completely blocked or frustrated by a statist society? I'll raise my hand again. Yeah, I think this is a common feeling among many of us. Thank you. I love this meme, but I have found, so I've been in this community since 2011. I started making videos a while ago. And I've been to a lot of these events, I've talked to a lot of people online, and I found a common sentiment. It's not necessarily the rule, but it is common, is a lot of people love to blame the government for all their problems. And there's this mentality of, if only I or humanity could escape the matrix, then I would finally be happy. If only something were different, if only there were some different external factor, then I wouldn't be so unhappy on the inside. Well, there's also the additional layer that many of us really like to mock statists for, being statists and being emotional and stuck in their miserable world of subservience and ignorance, and I'm so guilty of this, especially if you look at my older videos. Like, that's all I ever did was mock people. I use this meme just because all I did was Google sheeple. It's kind of a derogatory term, and one came up. I see sheeple who don't even know they're supporting mass murder and corporate greed. Oh my gosh, okay, yeah, true, okay. So in our often common internal narrative, we have this sense of, here are these other people, these statists, and they're slave to emotions and propaganda, but we're evolved. We're anarchists. We've seen the truth. We've transcended. We're free, right? Well, bear with me here, but I am about to argue that this elevated sense of freedom from statism as being truly free is as delusional as statist thinking they can tax their way to prosperity. But before I get into that, I don't want to trigger anybody. This isn't to say that our philosophy is wrong. Obviously, I believe in the philosophy of freedom. And I would pretty confidently argue that we tend to be more open-minded than your average statist. And I also don't want to act like our feelings of frustration and sadness and feeling alone in response to statism are invalid. They're so valid. I feel them all the time. I'm sure a lot of us do. So I'm not here to disregard these things and act like we shouldn't be feeling this way. How we feel is probably like a completely normal and appropriate response to all the injustice and violence we see in the world. So this is all legitimate. However, while the weight of this adds stress and hopelessness and anxiety and anger, just like all the other humans who are not yet anarchists, we have trauma and programming that is at the very best peripherally related to statism. So an example of that would be if you were hit in your home growing up. That's a trauma in and of itself, and it may make people more willing to submit to violent authority in government, but the problem didn't start with the government, unless we're passing it down from generation. It's interrelated, but there's still something very nuclear family, I mean. So the trauma is very personal, and the rage we feel toward the state is only the tip of the iceberg. But the government becomes a perfect target for us to project and lay blame and be angry, and then we don't have to address our true wounds. So when I talk about these things, I don't feel authentic unless I talk about my own struggles. Like, I don't want to stand up here and be talking about emotional well-being and having these reactive emotions and act like I don't. So I want to give you a personal experience, and this is where I'm probably going to cry. So I used to be editor-in-chief for the Anti-Media, and it was my dream job. You can see our little anarchist symbol up there. We covered all these topics that people like you love to hear about. We covered the police state, the war machine, corruption, literally everything. We would cover disruptive technology, cryptocurrency, and I loved my job so much. I started in 2014, and I became an editor in 2015, and I didn't think I was gonna cry this much. Jeez Louise, not in my practice sessions, but all right, I'm gonna keep going. I knew I was gonna cry, but here we go, waterworks. So yeah, it was, thank you. Thank you. It was a challenge as people, you know, when we're involved in this, when we're entrenched in all these stories, it's heavy, it can be a struggle, but even in all my gratitude meditations that I do, having Anti-Media and being able to work with this organization was always something I was so grateful for. However, as some of you know, last year, we talked about it a little bit yesterday, the purge happened. Whoa. On October 12th, and on October 12th, it was a Thursday in the morning, our founder, Nick Burnaby, got this top notice from Facebook saying our page of over 2 million followers had been unpublished. And then a little bit later in the day, this is my favorite notice ever. Like, I didn't think I would like anything about being banned, but I got this notice from Twitter, and it says, you've been suspended for violating the Twitter rules, specifically for nothing. There's no answer there. And when I appealed and they denied it, the answer was even more ridiculous. I didn't include that screenshot. It's safe to say, obviously, Anti-Media was also banned from Twitter. It wasn't just me. Our creative executive was banned. Our Twitter operator was banned. She got her page back when the LA Times did a story on it, but we did not. So we're still banned. And how did that make me feel? I have to get into this, because it's a key part of what I want to talk about today. So I listed them so I didn't forget, as if I would forget how I feel. But felt powerless, silenced, demoralized, disheartened, hopeless, insignificant, frustrated. This is what I've been going through the last year. And on top of that, I've been experiencing what the Buddhists call the second arrow. So I'm already struggling. I already have these emotions that are difficult to deal with. And on top of that, I'm like, oh my God, Carrie, why are you being like this? Like, you should be stronger. You should fight back harder. Should be inspiration to, you know, not let up. But that's not how I feel. So I have been struggling with it. And I want to be open about that. I haven't really talked about it outside of like, man, this sucks. But it has had a big effect on me. However, this is what I want to get to. I'm just going to read it, because I don't want to, cry and lose my train of thought. These emotions are all pretty much exactly what I would expect someone in my situation to feel. This is a normal reaction. But what if the intensity of my reactivity around being banned was particularly raw and delicate because the entire experience triggered much deeper wiring in me, which I like to call conditioning, just the way we've been conditioned in our lives that have nothing to do with the state. It could have to do with the state, but that's not what I'm talking about. So it was almost like deja vu. So I have had other experiences in my life. I'm not going to get too far into them. I've talked about them briefly in other speeches and other videos, but I am a child of divorce, like many people. It was a particularly turbulent one. I got caught in the middle at the same time, like 3 of my grandparents died, my dog died, like it was a rough time. But what did that experience leave me feeling? Powerless, silenced, demoralized, disheartened, hopeless, insignificant, frustrated, and embarrassed by these reactions. And I would guess, I can't speak for anyone, but I would guess that when any one of us encounters something in our lives that's triggering, that hurts, that causes immense suffering, it's not the first time we felt it. It's probably a very familiar feeling, even if we're not tapped into where exactly it came from. And I also want to say, I'm not special. I am not the only person who's ever felt this way. Maybe other people have not had my exact experience, but the feelings I've been feeling are common among humanity. I'm not alone. And it's also the case that me struggling with Anti-Media, before really trying to go inward and think about what else was underneath, there's an unconscious, or many are unconscious of the root of the pain, and they're reacting only to the tip of the iceberg. And what is the consequence of that? First, I want to talk about the consequences with statism. So if you look at the political realm, especially in America, really anywhere, there's so much blame and anger and reactivity and contempt. And that makes it really easy for people to dehumanize their fellow humans. When they're caught in their own trap and they're so consumed with their own suffering, how could they possibly look out at others who disagree with them or who seem like a threat and not dehumanize them and not disconnect? This is a picture of a rally or a protest in Washington, D.C. that Ford Fisher of News to Share documented. The video is actually quite disturbing. It's just an anti-Trump protester with a Trump supporter, and they are just going at each other, and you can really feel the hatred. There's so much reactivity. Like, you can see it in their faces. If you watch the video, oh my gosh, it's on his channel. I try not to watch those things, but it's like I couldn't look away. I was like, this is where we are. And I know not everyone is this extreme, but it's really bubbling up. And this brings me to a quote from one of my favorite meditation teachers. She's a former therapist. She's a Buddhist. And I'm just going to get into it. It's called Unreal Othering. So Tara Brach says, in moments that we find ourselves stuck in reactivity or in some conflict or division, we create what I call an unreal other. Rather than a living, feeling being with wants, needs, and fears, another person has become an idea in our mind and is not subjectively alive or real to us. They're two-dimensional and flat. The more stressed we get, the less real they become. We are the protagonist of our own story, and the other is like a puppet or a pawn. We begin to see them as something that can help us, hurt us, or is simply irrelevant. And I think that in the political world, it's those last two especially. We see these enemies because of the political system, because of the nature of democracy and majority rule. We see these people who don't agree with us as threats, or as they don't matter. The way some people look at refugees and immigrants, the way other people look at Trump supporters. They've managed to completely disconnect from their humanity. And this really fuels the political system and is a great tool for politicians and the people in the ruling class. And I want to discuss just briefly the lure of why statism is so powerful with this interplay of our internal emotions that maybe we're not conscious of, but definitely drive our behavior. And it's, I think, especially powerful with democracies and republics, because statism, especially democracies and republics, seem to meet all the needs so many of us didn't have met when we were young. And I want to use elections as an example. So when someone votes and they really believe in the system, they feel heard. They feel like they have agency. They feel like they matter. They feel like someone cares about them, even if we can sit here and be like, oh my gosh, okay. But that's the propaganda. That's what people are led to believe. And when you go and you punch that little box, or whatever, I don't vote, I haven't voted in a while, but like whether you tap the screen or you punch the, what's the ballot? The ballot, yeah. You feel like you got something out of it. And it might feel like you're temporarily satisfied. I'm heard, I used my voice, I voted, right? Like there's this gratification and feeling of actualization almost. But eventually that goes away. And then another election comes around and now we have to vote again. We have to be heard again. Use your voice, be heard. And I think that this is a lot of the reason, this underlying suffering, that people get so corralled into statism, because it's promising them all these things their inner children need and they may not even know they need. Before I go any further, I just want to get into the shared humanity of all of this. The right-wing keyboard warrior. So I get a lot of comments, or I see a lot of comments. Let's just turn the Middle East into a parking lot. Okay, well, there's some anger there. I think it's a little more likely that the person typing in all caps on the internet, really upset at these strangers they don't know in another part of the world, probably has some underlying anger issues that have nothing to do with those people. And they're acting out, and they're triggered, and they're reactive. But it feels way better to be mad at those other people than to go inward. It's not a conscious decision. They're like, I don't want to feel my feelings. I'm going to be mad at that brown person. No, it's not that. It's just that's the default. Another one, the tantrum-throwing pussy hatter. We've seen the videos of the people with their pink little hats and they're screaming in the streets and they're hysterical. They're blaming Donald Trump for all their problems. Again, chances are there might be some trauma there that has absolutely nothing to do with Donald Trump. I think that to have that kind of a reaction to something external, you're dealing with something internally. And now I have one that may not go over well, but I gotta talk about it. So the power tripping cop. I'm not talking about the sociopaths who are like, I wanna kill people, I'm gonna be a cop, because yes, they exist, and perhaps some of us here would believe that's all of them simply by making that decision. However, I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say maybe there are a few cops who don't just wanna kill, but maybe they are attracted to control or authority. They may not necessarily wanna hurt other people, but if you look at those cops, the ones who are just, getting joy out of writing tickets and ruining people's days, I would guess they probably had some childhood trauma too. And me, then there's me. I'm not a statist, but if you watch my older videos, holy crap, I'm so reactive, I'm so mean, I'm so angry. And again, yes, I understand there's a lot of really effed up stuff going on in the world, but years later, when I looked back on it, I realized like, oh my gosh, this distortion of truth, that's a trigger for me. That's part of my conditioning. This feeling alone in the world and like nobody cares. Oh wow, another thing that happened in my childhood. Oh my gosh, I can't believe it. How coincidental. Why was I so angry? Why was I so triggered? And I'm just going to read from this one because clearly it's long. Hurt people hurt people. Emotional suffering and unconsciousness is bad enough, but projected into the political world, it escalates not only to people being awful to each other, but also to widespread violence and death. As the saying goes, hurt people, and what I see in politics are a bunch of inner children running around with no presence and no awareness. It is a shitstorm of millions of people's unregulated and unprocessed emotions filtered through politics, which gives false refuge and the illusion of having their needs met by an external source, even as people continue to suffer internally. We're grasping, but not we, we're anarchists, but a lot of people are grasping. They just want a fix. They just want the pain to go away. They don't want to be afraid. They don't want to be struggling. And then you have this big daddy government that comes in and says, I will protect you, I will save you. Whatever flavor of statism you have, that's what government does. But what about the anarchist community? Because I asked earlier, whether you're an anarchist, whether you're a statist, have you ever felt frustrated? We may not be using the guns of government to force people into submission, but there are a lot of people suffering in this community too, because we're human, because humans suffer. It is human to feel pain and to suffer. I've talked about this with a lot of people in the community, and I don't think anyone has disagreed with me. Like, yeah, some of us are sad. A lot of us are struggling. I am one of them. It's an ongoing process. But no matter how free our minds may be, if our hearts are locked up in this programming, we can understand that government is violence and violence is immoral. Yeah, cool, great. But if we're still acting from unconscious behaviors and unhealed wounds, I don't think we're ever gonna really be free. One, because we're not free internally, but two, because we're gonna have trouble relating to each other and connecting with each other, as well as ourselves. And I don't see that going well in an anarchist society. So, how do you heal though? So, before I get into this, I just wanna say that over the last few years, I've noticed a big uptick, both in mainstream society and in the anarchist community, of people who really wanna heal. They don't want to be stuck. They want to help themselves. They're looking for solutions, and I love that, and I really commend that. Whatever the modality, that's so beautiful, and it's so lovely to see. That's my disclaimer. So this is me doing yoga. So let's see, this was 2013, and it was a really rough time in my life. I was already an anarchist, but I was still struggling, because oh my gosh, just changing your philosophy doesn't undo all of your trauma. So I started doing yoga, and I went to I'd gone to a couple classes, didn't really connect with it. The third class I went to, I walked out feeling like, oh my gosh, I finally have some peace. I don't remember the last time I had peace. And I actually, for the first time since I was like 9 years old, I felt like myself. It was like I had removed some barriers and I was finally connected with myself. So I'm like, this is it. Yoga's my thing. Yoga's gonna fix me. I'm gonna go do it 5 times a week and it's gonna make me happy and I'm never gonna have to worry about any of that again. Well. I became a yoga teacher. I got certified. I still do yoga, so I'm not trying to knock yoga, but after a while, all of a sudden, those old familiar feelings started creeping back in. Didn't matter how much yoga I did. Didn't matter how much kundalini I did. Still wasn't going anywhere. It was still stuck in me. So then I found meditation, which one of my yoga teacher trainers recommended. Started meditating daily, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is it. I'm finally at peace. Yeah, cool. I'm gonna be happy now. All I have to do is meditate. But then, of course, some life situation happened and there I went spiraling again. And I did this with many different things. So then it was acupuncture, it was energy healing, it was sweat lodge ceremonies, which are awesome. And I love all of these things, I really do. I still do them. Yoga is a part of my life. I meditate daily. I'm not here to say that these don't add value to people's lives. Yoga and meditation especially are shown in studies to help ease the symptoms and the suffering of anxiety and depression. But why didn't they fix me? Because as much as I love them, and I really, really, really do, my life would be missing if I stopped doing these things, or something would be missing from my life. But as much as I love them, I was unconsciously, and definitely with good intentions, just trying to escape my feelings. I was trying to run away from my pain. Rather than exploring and sitting with my trauma and suffering, which I had absolutely no idea how to do, why would I, of course, I was using these things to try to just get away. And that's an example of what's called spiritual bypassing. I didn't put a definition of this speech, but it's basically using spiritual methods and tactics unintentionally to run away from what's going on inside rather than turn toward it. And that eventually leads to these issues just crying out louder to be heard, which is exactly what happened to me. And I just want to point out, obviously yoga and meditation, all of these things, energy work, acupuncture, sweat lodges, they're obviously far more beneficial than they are detrimental. I recommend all of them, they're awesome. But the mechanism of escape that we really need to be present to, in my opinion, is very similar to people who were addicted to anything, to drugs, to social media, to sex. It's, I can't be here right now, I need something else. I need a fix, I need something to fill me up, I gotta go away. And that is so familiar to me, so I'm not talking about people I don't know, I'm talking about me. So just want to be very clear about that. And so to summarize, all of my deeper issues kept bubbling up and spilling over, and being an anarchist couldn't stop it. So what actually helped? So this is what's helped me. I'm just going to go into them very briefly. And I don't want to spend too much time on them because they're awesome to explore yourself. But my first thing is mindful self-compassion. And this is an amazing book. It's called the Mindful Self-Compassion Workbook. You can write in it. There's exercises. It's like $15 on Amazon. It's by Kristen Neff. She's a psychologist as well as a meditation teacher. And the 3 components are, 1, this seems so basic, but it's actually not common, and we're not taught how to do it. How am I feeling? Let me just check in with myself. What emotions am I actually feeling right now? In the workbook, it's like an end of day thing. So it's like, what did I feel today? So I'm going to go back to my anti-media example. So I feel really hopeless, and I feel powerless, and I feel silenced, etc. Part 2, which I think is really sweet, is checking in with the shared humanity of it. If I feel this way, I mentioned this earlier, other people in the world feel that way too. And for me, that really made me feel less alone, because I think so much of our suffering when we are struggling with these things is feeling like we are the only ones. But at the end of the day, the person sitting next to you has probably felt the same emotion as you at some point. Maybe you're feeling the same thing right now, you don't know. But bringing in that shared humanity helps us reconnect rather than doing that unreal othering thing. And then the third element of mindful self-compassion is talking to yourself like you would a friend. So my internal dialogue, and I've talked to so many people who agree, is kind of mean, right? Get it together, get over it, suck it up, be a champ, get it done. But I would never talk to my best friend that way if she were struggling. If you do, I gently maybe suggest that you find a different way to communicate if your friend is bawling their eyes out and you're like, nah, get over it. I don't know. That's my opinion, but doing that to yourself is not something we're taught. We're taught to be nice to our friends. We're not taught to be nice to ourselves. And there's so many narratives out there telling us that we're not enough. So of course we're going to believe that. So it's really shifting the wiring into a kinder attitude towards ourselves. So that's been incredibly helpful for me. The second takes it a little bit further. Some of you may have heard of this. It is called RAIN. It's an acronym. It is a Buddhist practice. And I have learned about it almost exclusively through Tara Brach. I highly recommend her. She's not an anarchist, but oh my gosh, she's so wonderful. And her heart is just so open and full, and she has such amazing wisdom. But it stands for recognize, allow, investigate, and nurture. So recognize is very similar to the self-compassion work. So what am I feeling? Just what's here. Allow sounds really easy, but it can actually be quite difficult because, again, we're so conditioned to run from the discomfort. We're human. Why would we want to feel pain? Why would we want to stay with something that's unpleasant? Of course we're going to run, but the allowing okay, I feel disheartened right now. That's what's here. Tara Brach calls it kind of radical acceptance. Just accept what is. You can't change it in this moment, so the best you can do is allow it to be there. And in doing so, you create a little bit of space so you're not lost in this tumultuous storm of emotion, which, believe me, I've been there all the time. But when I do this practice, it allows me to take a step back. The next one is investigate, which sounds really serious, but it's kind of fun. So it becomes, where do I feel this in my body? I almost always feel it in my heart, but you could feel it in your solar plexus. You could feel it in your throat. But it's not just locating it. So the next question that is really key is, what am I believing about myself when I'm feeling these feelings? So for me, when I feel lost and disheartened and powerless, underneath that, I'll be totally real, it's I'm not enough. I'm not good enough. Why can't I be better? Why can't I overcome this? And that's a really core belief for me. And that's a tough one to be with. It's ugh, my entire self is not enough. Oh crap, well that's a lot to deal with. And it's not just the state that causes that. And in that investigation, you then learn, well, how can I be with this? How can I be with this feeling that's so difficult? What does it need? And often for me, this comes back to inner child stuff, which I'm a huge proponent of and I love. But in that moment, I'm needing, first of all, I need to know it's okay that I feel this way. Not everything's okay, it's fine, because that can be kind of dismissive as somebody who's really struggling, but you're allowed to feel this. Of course you feel this way. You're struggling with some really tough stuff. But it's not just that. It could be, I just need to know, and I'm talking to myself here, it gets kind of meta, I'm talking to my inner children and my heart, but what else could I offer? You just need me to be with you. You need to know that you're enough as you are. And sometimes it's tough to even believe myself when I'm trying to give myself the support, but even just putting my hand on my heart is an act of love. It's an act of being there for myself. So once you figure that out, you nurture it and you sit with it. And I have found, I've done this practice probably 150 times in the last year, because I'm just oh, I'm feeling it again. Oh no, I gotta get into it. Fine, avoid it as much as I can. And then sometimes you just gotta go with it. Every time I do this practice, it gives me a release and it gives me peace. And I'm so grateful for it. And then I just have one more. And these kind of this is sort of an amalgamation that deals more with the inner child of self-compassion and rain. So I'm just gonna read this. We are stepping in to give ourselves what we desperately needed as children and need now in a practice of reparenting that seeks not to fix us or get rid of how we feel, but rather to learn to be with the unavoidable pain that comes with being a human being, and in doing so, not only release and heal some of these feelings, but also deepen our connection with our true self. I just wanna note, this doesn't mean that the people who have hurt us in our life are bad. Like, I love my mom and dad. They made some mistakes, you know? And the biggest part of this self-compassion practice for me has then been extending it to them. It's like, oh wait, they're human too. And maybe they were suffering, and maybe they were unconscious of things. That doesn't make them bad, but there is room for both. I can understand that my parents were struggling without condoning some of the mistakes they made and still allowing my hurt to be there. Back to politics, we're almost done. So just as we can hold space for the ways our personal trauma affected us and the suffering of those who inflicted it, we can see the innocent and exploited humanity of those who participate in a corrupt and violent system. And it's not only because they were propagandized into it, but also because the parts of them striving to be heard by government are innocent. And again, it doesn't mean we have to be like, oh, okay, then tread on me, you know, go right on, you're suffering, so by all means. No, it's not that. We can fight back against it, we can challenge it. We can refuse to submit, but we can also not allow ourselves to become numb and disconnected from our fellow humans. We can see that they're suffering too. So I just want to share a quote. This is sort of an occult-themed conference, which I didn't touch on much at all. But I have a quote from someone who talks about it. Her name's Laura Matsu. She's a meditation teacher. Highly recommend following her. She's awesome. It's a little long, but here we go. Before you look for your guru, before you try ayahuasca, before you go into the occult, before you go into the astral realms to try to find the demonic being who is draining your life force, start with the basic psychological issues. Work on your issues with your parents. If you are in an abusive relationship, it's most likely you grew up in a home where abuse occurred and there's some part of you that needs to be healed so that abuse no longer feels like home. If you find yourself being attracted to emotionally unavailable people, find the trauma in your childhood that created the core belief that you are not worthy of love. We often want to jump to far off places when really the entry point of the patterns in our lives is to be found in the places in our early childhood that we have not addressed yet. Start from the ground up. And I just love that, and I just want to say, this is going to be a lifelong practice for me. It's not like I do rain 3 times and I sit with my inner child a couple times and I'm like, oh, done, fixed, cool, I never have to worry. No, these are deeply steeped beliefs. And I kind of find myself doing that with statism as well. It's like I still have these statist tendencies and then I check it and it's like, no, Carrie, think rationally. No, okay, we're good, got it. But it is an ongoing thing and it does take commitment. So I'm just gonna read, these are my last 2 little points, but I don't wanna mess them up. So yes, government causes trauma and suffering, and I do not want to discount that. But even if we become anarchists, we can't keep up our conditioned beliefs and habits and reactivity if we really want to establish and maintain a free society. If we're caught up in our unconscious impulses and conditioning, the worst elements of statism will crop right back up. And just like freedom, true conscious awareness and commitment to individual healing require personal responsibility and taking care of yourself free of dependence on other external sources. And in my humble opinion, we need both to ever be truly free. That's it. Thank you. Oh, thank you. Thank you guys for letting me cry.
Ladies and gentlemen, Carrie Weather. All right. We're going to set up some new laptop action, and we're going to get to a gentleman who mysteriously wandered his way into our, let's say, our path in life.
You know what? I'll just do it from this.
Do you want to set it up? So I'll tell a funny story about how we met this character. we were at Anarchapulco 2019 this year, and we actually had a sponsor who was going to help us put this conference together. And we were interviewing all sorts of people, and we figured the sponsor was pretty open-minded since he was sponsoring an anarchist conference. But he seemed to have an issue with this one guy right here after we got an interview with him. So lo and behold, we had to judge the monetary offers we were getting from this sponsor versus journalistic integrity, and pretty much this man had too many important things to say for us to take the money. So we told the sponsor to walk because we're not going to censor ourselves and this man and his amazing beliefs. And so without further ado, Jason Goodman, everyone.
Thank you, Carmen. I appreciate that. Okay, I just want to get everything set here. Whoops, that was not what I wanted. There's always this moment before the presentation where everything on the laptop is on the screen here. Sorry, give me just a second.
We got to find some sweet theme music to play for these moments.
Okay.
Yeah, he's going to be right there. Everyone, Jason Goodman from Crowdsource the Truth.
Thanks, everybody. Okay, there we go. So we got a little bit of a compressed crowd. Is there anybody here who has never heard the term social engineering or has any doubts about what social engineering is? If you've never heard it, everybody here knows what it is. Good. So we're going to talk about social engineering. Obviously, everybody knows about social media, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, all this stuff. So social engineering, in a word, fake news, right? Whether it's happening on a social media platform or CNN or the New York Times or wherever it might be, somebody's trying to convince you that something is not true, something that is not true is to coerce you into something, to make you believe something, to make you act a certain way. So a lot of people here, everybody is awake to this. Many of us decided the news is fake. We're going to create our own news. Going to do shows, we're going to do events like this, but inevitably we are visited by the trolls. So who are these people? Are they just disgruntled, miscreants in their parents' basements who are eating too many Cheetos and typing out nasty stuff on the computer, or is there something more insidious going on? Could these moronic comments on Twitter and Facebook and YouTube and elsewhere, could they be coming from a centralized government operation or some power structure? It seems maybe difficult to believe. Has everybody here heard about the State Department's Global Engagement Center? Anybody here not heard of that? Okay. I think you're going to find this very interesting. Here we've got an ad, very attractive young woman on her phone. This appeals to a lot of people. Hey, that's me on the subway. That's a girl I might want to talk to. This is something I can relate to. But what's the mission of this Global Engagement Center? They want to direct, lead, synchronize, integrate, coordinate all the efforts of the federal government to recognize, understand, expose, and counter foreign state and foreign non-state propaganda and disinformation efforts aimed at undermining or influencing the policies, security, or stability of the United States. Now, everything we're talking about here today is essentially aimed at undermining the government of the United States, and all they need to do is get some troll in there to, as they do in my case, say, oh, don't listen to Jason Goodman, he's a Mossad agent. Now, I've never been to Israel. I do not work for Mossad. I am not a Mossad agent, never dealt with them at all. But by saying that, it at least introduces the doubt, can someone now receive funding from this Global Engagement Center to troll, attack any comments that I might make? I don't know. There's another thing that a lot of people don't know about called InfraGard. Has anybody here not heard of InfraGard? Okay, I think you'll find this interesting. InfraGard is a partnership between the FBI and members of the private sector. The program is a vehicle for seamless public-private collaboration. That's important. I find language to be very important. Public-private collaboration with the government that expedites the timely exchange of information. The people that are in this InfraGard thing, the membership includes business executives, entrepreneurs, military and government officials, computer professionals, academia, state and local law enforcement. That sort of covers essentially everybody. Could be anybody who's in this thing. So the part of this that is really pertinent to what I'm talking about with you guys today is this public-private concept. Are people familiar with the term steganography? Do we know what that is? Steganography is the transmission of coded messages, basically. It's using something that's publicly accessible to privately communicate. So that's why I pointed out that public-private aspect of this InfraGard thing. And I think most people probably will not recognize the guy in the pinstriped suit. That's a guy named JBS Haldane. He's pictured here with Aldous Huxley. Now, JBS Haldane, despite having real limited education as far as, great thinkers and academics normally would, The guy didn't even complete traditional university education, but yet he's written all these books in English and in German, books about physics, genetics. He was the first person to propose the concept of genetically driven human cloning. He's written books about the biology of insects compared to larger animals, evolution, criticisms of it, possible worlds. I mean, he hung out with a lot of people that were right around, dancing around the kind of emergence of quantum physics. He's one of the most respected scientific thinkers of his day, and he was also a spy for Stalin, which is interesting. That's not widely known. He wrote, out of all these academic books, he wrote this book, which stands out to me. It's called My Friend, Mr. Leakey. And I used to do a lot of shows with a researcher named Quinn Michaels, who brought this book to my attention. And the thing that's interesting about this book, not only is it the only children's book written by this super science-minded guy, which is weird, it's filled with these sort of odd images that contain lots of subtle suggestions and subtextual kind of references. And it even goes as far as having some pretty blatantly, I guess we'd call them hidden messages, but I don't know if people are noticing this writing on the floor. It's reversed. And if we flip it, it says sausage next time. This seems to be a reference to Haldane's friend Norbert Wiener, Wiener sausage. He had some sort of physics theory having to do with sausage. This guy was interested in cybernetics. He's an MIT cyberneticist. Very interesting. We've got spies hanging out with MIT guys. And I wanted to show everybody the MIT library with all the writings of Mr. Wiener, but strangely, the page we're looking for no longer lives here. It's been scrubbed down the MIT memory hole. Luckily, the archive.org had it, so people can look at some of the stuff that he's written there, but I digress. I want to get back to my main topic here of steganography. It's simply the concealment of messages, private communications within some sort of public forum. And I personally believe that this has been going on a lot, all the time, perhaps. Now, here's an example of a steganographic message in a Washington Post article. This is an article from 1979, written by a journalist named Judith Mann, who unfortunately died in 2006. It's an article about a woman named Christine Marcy, and people who are familiar with David Hawkins and Field McConnell will have noticed David in my earlier slide. David and Field aren't really working together anymore. David and I do a show together every Friday. People who watch Crowdsource the Truth will be familiar with that. But Christine Marcy is the sister of Field McConnell. And in 1979, she was a super great employee. And they were talking about how she had her first child 2.5 years ago. We can see right here, her name is Christine Marcy. And below the fold, as they say, the article continued. And it mentions this person, Mendenhall. The whole article is talking about Christine Marcy, Marcy this, Marcy that, Christine Marcy. Her husband is Eric Marcy. Her maiden name is McConnell. She's the sister of Field McConnell. How do we get Mendenhall? There's no explanation of who this Mendenhall person is, and the entire article is talking about how Christine Marcy is pregnant with a baby that is due in early August of 1979. So I had only ever seen this article in thewashingtonpost.com. I wasn't reading the Washington Post in 1979 when I was a child, but I wanted people to notice this is a photographic reproduction of the paper. This is a scan of the microfilm that I got from the New York Public Library. And if you see that where it's saying the first child 2.5 years ago, we can see some of the disruptions in the type. There's cuts in some of the letters. And I have come to the conclusion that the Washington Post has taken articles from the newspaper prior to, the internet and the digital layout of the newspaper, and they've run a process called OCR, optical character recognition, so they can put all these legacy articles online. Now, people who have ever done OCR to a large document will know that although it's remarkably accurate, it's prone to fail, particularly when we have a low-quality scan like this. So the WashingtonPost.com, as I was reading it, said Christine Mary had her first chili. And it was like, what? This doesn't make any sense. So we figured out that there was this OCR problem happening. And then something really weird happened. Some of these trolls who like to attack my YouTube channel, Crowdsource the Truth, changed the article. They contacted the Washington Post and said, hey, there's a bunch of typos in this article. So when you go to thewashingtonpost.com now, even the URL that you go to will show that March 25th, 2019, this incredibly obscure article about a person that probably everyone here has never heard of was changed. And not only was it changed in such a way that all the typos related to Christine Marcy and Chili's versus children were changed, but the reference to this Mendenhall person was removed. And now it says Marcy's baby was due in early August. No reference whatsoever to Mendenhall. And the author is dead. We don't know who Mendenhall is. So I called the Washington Post and I started a technical support ticket. There's a problem on the website. Can we change it? Got an email back. Wrote a detailed email to the person at the Washington Post, including this image, which is a photographic reproduction of their own newspaper from 1979. No return phone call. No return to the email. So I called the guy. Couldn't get him on the phone. I called him. Eventually, I just called and said, hey, can you connect me to the Metro desk? And this guy answered. I could tell. He had a very distinctive voice that I had heard on his voicemail. And I said, Terrence, it's Jason Goodman. How are you? And he said, can you hold on a second? And he put me on hold for 19 minutes. And then when I hung up and called back, I've never gotten the guy back on the phone again. So I went and found out who the editor-in-chief of the Washington Post was, a guy named Barron, I think. And I called and left a voicemail for him, explaining that I am under the belief that Mr. McArdle is avoiding my phone calls, not wanting to talk about this, not wanting to correct this problem in the newspaper. No call back. I called 2 days later, and the voice prompt from the Washington Post gave me this very strange message. It said, instead of the normal message, which previously had said, welcome to the Washington Post. If you know your party's extension, please dial blah, blah, blah. Now it said, you've reached the Special Projects Department of the Washington Post, and the best way to communicate with us is in writing. And it gave me an email address, and it hung up. And I thought to myself, that's weird. In 2 days, the Washington Post has changed their voice prompt system. I called back a few times, and I got the same message. So then I called from a landline, a different number, and it said, welcome to the Washington Post. If you know your party's extension. I said, wow. The Washington Post has blocked my phone number over Mendenhall's baby. So I called the editor from this alternate phone number, and I got right through to his executive assistant, who was aware of me, aware of this situation, and I thought to myself, my God, Mendenhall's baby has made it all the way up to the editor-in-chief of the Washington Post, to the extent that his executive assistant, I got flies and the monitor is freaking out. The point of the matter is the editor-in-chief of the Washington Post was aware of this. In 1979, it said Mendenhall's baby, and now they said there's nothing they can do to change it. Somehow, unknown social engineers had changed it from what it actually said to something that it didn't say, that there's no way of, how do we know? It seems like it was meant to say Mendenhall, but they changed it. So I want to talk to you about another guy. Do people recognize this guy? He's the father of this guy, the current Attorney General, who I'm sure people here know was previously the Attorney General of the United States of America under this guy, George H.W. Bush. Huge criminal. So Donald Barr, the father of William Barr, which incidentally one of the viewers of Crowdsource the Truth pointed out to me, and I love this because this is what crowdsourcing the truth is all about. A viewer pointed out that Donald Barr, as you may have noticed, has a ridiculous number of pens in his pocket. He has 6 pens in his pocket, which I cannot imagine what one person would need 6 pens for, but he also has them divided by this little divider. And someone pointed out that this was him sending an encoded message with the pens 3-3. So that's pretty interesting. Do people know what this guy has recently become famous for? He hired this guy, who also didn't have the traditional type of university education that you would expect a math and science teacher at one of the most prestigious prep schools in New York City to have. Didn't have a master's degree, a lot of weird stuff about this guy, who also likes to hang out with MIT cyberneticists like Marvin Minsky. Marvin Minsky, incidentally, just today has come out with the extremely classy defense of rape that the victim wanted it. She was entirely willing, according to Minsky. I don't know too much about Minsky, but that's a weird connection. Back to Donald Barr. So Donald Barr was a teacher. He was into academia, wrote a lot of books about education and educational topics, but he also wrote some strange books. He wrote a book called Planet at Arms. He wrote a book called Space Relations about all the planets have been colonized and some interstellar diplomat gets enslaved and he's able to free himself from slavery by getting involved in a sexual relationship with one of the, it's an odd book. And I just found out in the preparation of this presentation, I don't know if he wrote this. This is a pulp, this magazine here, Argosy Weekly, was apparently the first pulp fiction magazine. The author of this one is Donald Barr Chidsey. So I don't know if that's the same guy or a different guy, but it's certainly a strange connection. I'm not at all familiar with Argosy Weekly, but it reminded me of this movie Argo, which was all about how great the CIA is. The movie was fake, but the mission was real. Okay? So this is a little bit of social engineering to get you to feel good about Iran-Contra. Didn't the CIA do a great job? They got these Canadian diplomats to help them free they didn't tell you about the cocaine that they were flying back from Nicaragua after they sold guns to Iran, and how that was a joint mission between the CIA and the Mossad, and how it involved all these guys who sort of seem to know people who know Jeffrey Epstein, who, Donald Barr's son was involved in these 6 incredibly controversial pardons of the people that were involved in Iran-Contra. So it just seems weird how, all these things, these messaging things, it really seems like a way that these guys are sharing messages. Now, when you go back to Jeffrey Epstein here, there's been a lot of reporting about Jeffrey Epstein in the New York Post. As a matter of fact, the narrative has been laid out for us in the New York Post that Jeffrey Epstein committed suicide. This story broke in the New York Post. And well, that seems logical. He's in the MCC in New York. The New York Post is going to have great law enforcement contacts in New York. They're going to know all about it. We've got this picture that's allegedly Epstein, even though Epstein has like a plastic surgery straight nose, and this guy has a very curved nose that looks sort of totally different. We don't know if this person on the table is dead or not. Who's this guy wearing a bulletproof vest? Why do we need a bulletproof vest to handle a dead guy? Very strange. And we also have heard all this information about how the guards were not there and the cameras weren't working. Incidentally, I spoke to the public information officer for the Department of Justice in New York City, and every single question I asked, he had no comment except for the question, can you confirm that the cameras in the jail cell were not working? He said he could not confirm that. That was interesting to me. So anyway, these stories about Jeffrey Epstein's death and suicide were broken by a New York Post journalist by the name of Larry Salona. How many people here have heard of Larry Salona? Right, nobody. Who the hell is Larry Salona? He's not Cy Hirsch, he's not Wolf Blitzer, yet in the movie Eyes Wide Shut, Larry Salona was a journalism consultant, and also his name was used in the byline. Now, Stanley Kubrick was one of the most meticulous film directors to ever live. His attention to detail was so extreme that when he wanted to make the movie Barry, what's the movie? Barry Lyndon, he had Leica invent a new type of lens that was so sensitive to light because he wanted to shoot the whole movie by candlelight because they had no electric lights at the time. So that's a unique film to see. Point of the matter is, Stanley Kubrick did not do anything that he did not want to do or choose to do, except with this movie. They didn't want him to release the movie in the way he had it edited. There's a big battle between the studio and Stanley Kubrick about Eyes Wide Shut. And then Kubrick died before the film was released, and the studio released a version that was not the version that Kubrick wanted. But the interesting thing about Larry Salona having his name in the byline here is that this article, this fictional article that appears in the movie and is reporting on some events in the movie, it's talking about a murder being disguised as a suicide. And there were a number of presentations today that I think were really complementary to what I'm going to do here, because I was just looking at this article and I noticed some of the numbers in it, right? So the gematrinator would be a good person to consult on this, but the victim, the fictional victim, was 30 years old, and she hadn't been seen since 4 a.m., and a witness who was reporting to Larry was 26 years old. So I don't know anything about gematria. I just see this number 33 showing up all over the place, and I feel like it's a steganographic marker telling people who know to look for it. Hey, this is our thing here. We've got this under control. But so 4 a.m. plus 26 years old is 30. 30 and 30 is kind of an encoded 33, I think. How many people saw or heard about this article in the New York Post where Epstein's girlfriend, Ghislaine Maxwell, was having a hamburger at the In-N-Out restaurant there in Los Angeles? So it's a little weird, right? I think most people now have heard through YouTube and elsewhere that, oh, it was Photoshop. Don't pay any attention to that. That's a distraction. Don't look at that. Don't look. Why are you looking at that? Stop looking at it. There's only 20 million YouTube channels. If you don't want to look at it, turn off Crowdsource the Truth and go look at something else. But why are all these people telling me not to look at it? I bet far fewer people heard that just 3 or 4 weeks prior to that article appearing, the New York Post started doing a lot of weird reporting about In-N-Out Burger. Now, In-N-Out Burger is a family-owned restaurant. It's not publicly traded. It doesn't exist throughout the nation. They only have restaurants in California, Nevada, Arizona, and Texas. So why is there all this reporting about the In-N-Out Burger? And how on earth are we expected to believe that an In-N-Out Burger falls out of the backpack of a 16-year-old girl traveling from Los Angeles to New York on her own on a red eye with 4 hamburgers? And what 16-year-old girl is buying 4 hamburgers? That seems like a lot. And it falls out of the bag after 6-8 hours of sitting in a backpack. Looks totally fresh, looks brand new. Not a single rat ate it. Not a single bird ate it. And it just, there was so much reporting about this. There was a total of 3 articles about this stupid hamburger laying on the street. They even got in touch with the executive vice president of In-N-Out Burger to answer the burning question of how did this hamburger end up in Queens? Forget about the accused rapist, pedophile, pimp who's making, according to Virginia Guffrey, child pornography. In-N-Out Burger doesn't want to talk about that. And I want this crowd to know, I haven't released this information extensively yet, but I've been in touch with In-N-Out Burger. And as a matter of fact, they threatened to sue me for publishing a phone call with one of their executives where she indicated that if the FBI would contact them, they'd provide closed-circuit television footage to help us understand if Ghislaine Maxwell was there or not. A lot of people have pointed out Photoshop work in this image. This Ghislaine Maxwell looks like she's about 30 in this photograph. She's 57 at the time that this was taken. This poster advertising the movie Good Boys apparently was never there. So someone either inserted the poster behind the glass before taking this picture or did Photoshop over there. This hamburger restaurant is 2 blocks away from where I used to live in Los Angeles. No one has spoken about the Good Neighbor restaurant, the diner over here in the background. So there's a lot of messaging potentially going on here. I spoke with Maxwell's lawyer who allegedly took this photo. She hung up on me right away. People can hear that phone call on crowdsourcethetruth.com. So there's a lot of weird messaging going on. And it seems the newspapers are aware of it, because when I sort of, tap on that to try to get some more information, they don't want to talk to me about it. I think this is a real big deal. So we did a video about steganographic messaging on Crowdsource the Truth, and one of the viewers of Crowdsource the Truth, it's, again, I think that Max said the truth is we don't know the truth. That could almost be like the signature statement for this conference, because I agree, we don't know the truth. That's the purpose of Crowdsource the Truth. I don't proclaim to be a truth teller, because that would presume that I know the truth. I am crowdsourcing this information. People come to me and I share it with everyone, and that begets more information. So a crowdsourcer who's got a lot of knowledge about digital steganography, actually encoding digital files within the digital photos that are stored on NewYorkPost.com. So this steganography has gotten so sophisticated and so complicated. They're speaking in a language that we're not even aware is being spoken. So I hope that people will go to crowdsourcethetruth.com, search for Crowdsource the Truth on YouTube, on Facebook. And as I said yesterday, really the best way to keep this effort going is to get onto subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth or patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. I know we're anarchists and we want everything to be, this is maybe a little too capitalist, but information wants to be free, but storing it on computers and traveling places to find it and having all the accounts that you need to get it out to everybody, that costs a lot of money. And I'm also getting sued by the fake CIA now, so defending all these lawsuits becomes a big deal. Hopefully the hamburger people will not do that, but I really want them to release that surveillance footage so that we can put some more questions to the New York Post and ask them, why are they following up about this hamburger laying in the street, but they haven't even published an article saying that there was a problem with the photographs of Ghislaine Maxwell. I think there are some people at some of these organizations who know all about this, and they are jealously protecting it. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Let's hear one more time for Jason Goodman, Crowdsource the Truth. My favorite speakers, honestly, are the journalists. I mean, that's my wheelhouse. I've loved journalism from back when I used to think CNN was real news. I watched C-SPAN as a kid. I used to buy into the whole New York Times, Washington Post being the pinnacle of journalism type thing. So when I lost that, when those outlets lost their shine for me, I really started to admire the independent voices out there, like Jason Goodman and like our next speaker. I think that it's work that goes unrewarded. It's work that, if you do it full time, it requires all of your energy and all of your time, and unless you really hustle it, there's very few rewards. Whereas, you can make a nice living writing for BuzzFeed or, the New York Times or whatever the case may be. So I'm really glad that we have such a good lineup. I mean, we did back-to-back with Carrie, Jason. Now we have another great independent media journalist from the Conscious Resistance Network, Derek Bros. But before that, you want to show, you have this image ready?
Check.
Yeah, announce it.
Miriam has a piece of art that she's going to be auctioning off for the Free Ross auction that we're going to have tomorrow. Also, the Mir One print out there and the skateboard are going for that as well.
Do you want to say something?
So, yeah, hop up.
Hop up.
Okay, so hey guys, I'm Miriam Gomez. I'm Derek's partner. Just wanted to share with you guys that I did find out that there was an auction happening, and I'm also an artist, and I wanted to donate one of my pieces to the auction. And of course, all the proceeds go to Free Ross. And I would burn mandalas. Maybe some of you have seen my mandalas. I'm about to hopefully pull up a picture of the piece that we're auctioning. It's a 2x2 feet wood-burned mandala. This
Beautiful.
is called Tree. It's nice and heavy piece. It can go up on a wall, on a studio, on your yoga studio, your office, your home, wherever you'd like it. No, I'm kidding. But yeah, 2x2 piece. I think we're starting the auction off at 3:33.
333.
Yep. Totally inspired and made with respect towards what I've been learning from a couple of indigenous tribes here in the U.S. And I wanted to make that in respect of that, and because I just really truly appreciate them and everything that they've been teaching me and sharing with me. And so yeah, I just wanted to make you guys aware of it, and I hope you guys are really enjoying the conference, as I am too, and meeting a lot of beautiful people. And Derek Gross is going up next.
Isn't her artwork amazing? All right, what's up, family? This conference feels like being with friends and family. Some of you guys I've met over the years at various conferences. Who remembers Free Your Mind? Yeah, we got any Free Your Mind veterans here? Cool, so this gives me that nice family Free Your Mind type vibe. But I'm gonna introduce myself briefly. I do apologize if some of my speech today is a little bit all over the place. It's on purpose. But so for those who don't know, my name's Derek Bros. I'm a journalist, activist. I have a website and YouTube channel called the Conscious Resistance Network. I've been doing this for the last decade, based in Houston. I have a radio show in Houston, and a lot of my work is based in Houston, not just through YouTube. And up until, I guess, 7 months ago, I've been pretty involved and committed to these various movements, truther movements, conspiracy movement, anarchist movement. But I decided to spend the last 7 months kind of getting out of that bubble, and that's what I'm going to talk about today, or at least my experiences with that and what I've been up to, and maybe some ideas on how we can continue to reach out to meet new people and keep growing these ideas so that we're not just preaching to the choir at events like this, as great as they are. We all know we're preaching to the choir here for the most part. Maybe we're uncovering some new details to the puzzle that we hadn't heard before, but generally, nobody's walking in this door who's not already, pursuing this knowledge. Unless you brought in a friend who's totally like, what the fuck are these people on? Some of you might be thinking that, it's all right. But yeah, so I've been spending the last 10 years since 2009 is when I started to wake up in Houston, getting into activism, getting into journalism, and then speaking at these conferences since 2013, places like Anarchapulco, speaking in anarchist events, speaking in transformational events, more kind of spiritual events, trying to bring the anarchist message to them, trying to bring the spiritual message to this community. My website, again, is The Conscious Resistance. It's also the name of a book trilogy that I've written, co-authored with my friend John Vibes. And it's, I guess you could say, the philosophy or the kind of movement that we were pushing and continue to push. Essentially, the conscious resistance just means the moment that you realize, the recognition, the understanding, the awareness that the fight for a more free, ethical, and just world isn't going to come from just fighting the institutions of the state or taking down the corporations. Much like Carrie Wedler was saying earlier. Anybody hear Carrie's talk? It was really good, yeah? So, like she was talking about, there's other avenues that, not all our problems can just be blamed on the government, can be blamed on the state. A lot of it is our own fucked up shit, our own trauma, our own things that we refuse to face. And I realized this early on in my work because prior to waking up to politics, watching Alex Jones' Endgame, reading Jim Marr's Rule by Secrecy, reading Ron Paul's Revolution, all those things happened to me within a span of a week, and nothing was ever the same. Before that happened, I had my more kind of internal, spiritual kind of starting the healing process awakening, because in 2005, almost 15 years ago, I was locked up. I got addicted to crystal meth when I was 20 years old, went to prison and started meditating, and really just had to go inward. I've been around drugs and alcohol and prison my entire life. My earliest memories are going to visit my birth father in prison, and just been in and around that on both sides of my family. My father actually died of a drug overdose last summer while I was touring the US. So it's something that's been very prevalent. When I found myself going down that same path, getting locked up, it really did force me to start thinking about what the hell I've been doing. How did I get in this position? Just everything that I went through, from ending up living on the streets and being around all these just crazy scenarios that sooner or later will turn into one of my books. But I went through those experiences, got locked up, and realized this is not the path I want to go on. And two of the things that saved my life in there, journaling every single day, writing down my thoughts, starting to uncover and peel back those layers that I've been so afraid of, understanding, getting to know myself, and seeing where my trauma was coming from and why I was using drugs as an escape. Now, I believe in freedom, of course, and I don't think people should be locked in cages for the things they put in their bodies, including crystal meth, as nasty as it is. I don't think that helps anybody. I needed help because I was super depressed and suicidal, and I was using drugs as an escape. Throwing me in a cage didn't fix me. I chose to, go inwards and to try to start healing that. So journaling every day, just starting to write my thoughts down and go through these things. And it was interesting, as I was locked up, I noticed even my handwriting started to become more precise and more slow, because I was just kind of detaching. Once I accepted, I looked at the calendar, I'm not going anywhere for at least a year. You got to let go of that outside world, and that's a very difficult feeling because you don't want to let go of the free world, as we call it in there. You don't want to let go of it. You want to think about it and call your friends and call your girlfriend every day, but all that does is make every moment go by so slow. So you have to let go. And you have to totally give into that powerlessness that there's not a single person, mom, girlfriend, friend, lawyer, who can get you out of that position. And you're there. So what are you going to do with it? Well, you can get educated on other crimes if you like. That option's always there. You can waste away. You can work out a lot. I chose to get to know myself better, and journaling helped me do that every day, just getting to know myself in that way. Then one day I read the newspaper, and on the Saturday section of the Houston Chronicle, they have a religion section where they quote from the Bible, the Torah, the Quran, and occasionally they quote from the Buddhist Bible, the Dhammapada. And there was a verse from the Buddha that I don't remember, but it was something that struck me just so deeply that I immediately needed to learn everything I could about Buddhism and started to dig into that, and then more specifically Zen Buddhism, and then more specifically Zazen sitting meditation. So I had my grandmother send me books and just went down this whole rabbit hole. So those things happened to me in 2005, between 2005 and 2008. I got out of prison for the final time the month before Obama got elected, which is a really interesting time to be re-emerging into the world. People are like, this guy's either going to save the world or he's the Antichrist. I didn't really know much about anything at that point. And I got out and I had the experience of being a felon and being judged in that whole new way. And while I was at a library applying for jobs, I read a book called Cannabis: A History that exposed me to the realities of the drug war and the origins of the drug war, racism, money, government, what else. And that was it was the first book I ever voluntarily took notes on because I was so enthralled by it. I was like, wow, why wasn't I taught this in high school? I was in advanced history classes, and I didn't learn about this. They didn't teach me this version. And that was the beginning of what else did I not learn. And as I said, went down those rabbit holes 10 years later, and here we are. But the spiritual aspect of it, the kind of internal healing happened to me first. So when I started to wake up to the political side, the corporate side of corruption and the kind of physical battle that we deal here, I was already aware of the necessity of working on our trauma and our healing. And so that ultimately became what we call the conscious resistance. And more recently, what I'm referring to as holistic activism or holistic anarchism. And I'll just be brief on this. Usually, I focus a lot on these topics. This is not really going to be the focus of today, but I will give a brief background. Holistic and anarchism, I've noticed, are two of these words that are probably the most overused and misused words out there and misunderstood. You see, when it comes to holistic, you see everything from holistic sex to holistic gardening to holistic cat food to holistic whatever, you name it, there's a holistic version of it. And anarchism, as we know, typically means violence in most people's minds. Or at least that's how the media uses it. So holistic truly means to study whole systems as opposed to breaking them down into individual pieces and different fields of study and different modalities that affects the way you understand a subject. So whether it's holistic psychology, holistic ecology, the study of the entire plant, animals, humans, plants, all as one species, one system. Holistic medicine in its truest sense is the study of the whole body, trying to treat the whole body, find the root cause rather than just treating the symptom, right? So that's what holistic means. And when you put that together with anarchism, which anarchism is just the simple and beautiful and wonderful idea that we each own ourselves and that we are the masters of our own lives, that we are smart enough, you are good enough, and you are powerful enough to own yourself and to decide what's best for you, and that we don't have to agree on everything. We can have healthy discussion and healthy debate, but that it's immoral, wrong, impractical to force our way on other people, to use violence on other people. That's all anarchism is. So we put that together, holistic anarchism. What is a holistic anarchist? A holistic anarchist is one that does not only point their fingers outwards to these institutions and towards these people and these places, and I've given presentations on the pyramid of power, what I call the pyramid of power, and I've identified who I see and that makes up this system. And that's necessary and it's important. If we don't wake up to these things, we can't start finding solutions, right? So you have to know what the problem is in order to start seeking the solution. But a holistic anarchist doesn't just stop there and say, okay, well, Monsanto is poisoning the world, so I'm going to go march all day and rage against Monsanto. The idea is to point those fingers back at yourself and to say, how am I contributing to this problem? Well, you know what? I'm still buying from companies that are using Monsanto's products. I'm still spraying my lawn with Roundup, or these kind of things. Well, you're a part of the problem then. Let's just be real. You are working against yourself and your own goals. And we each do this in different ways. This is not a thing of judgment. The whole idea, and I wrote a book all about this called The Holistic Self-Assessment. You can download it for free on my website, about how to look at your entire life and to start to see where your life is out of alignment with your stated goals and principles. Are your everyday habits and practices in line with that? And you'll find areas where you're inconsistent, because we all are, because it's very difficult to be a perfectly consistent principled person in this world. But the idea is that you start thinking holistically about all these areas of your life and not just talking about it on Facebook or not just focusing on one aspect. I think we have to take a full holistic approach. So that's what I call holistic anarchism. And whether you're an anarchist or not, holistic activism, it still applies, across the board. We can each work to getting the pieces of our lives more in alignment with the beliefs that we hold, as opposed to just stating them and talking about them, but actually living. This whole idea that we actually be the change that we want to be, that thing that we all love to shout about, actually doing it. So my work is focused on these topics for years now, and another aspect of that has been the philosophy of agorism and counter-economics, and I don't have time to get into those today, but I would ask anybody who hasn't heard that word, agorism, as in agora, as in the marketplace, like you see over here, agorism and counter-economics. Those are two other big parts of what I believe, and it's essentially just the idea that instead of trying to vote our way out of this thing we're dealing with, instead of trying to violently overthrow them, it won't work. I mean, we'd have to hurry. Got a lot of little time left. But the idea that instead of taking them head on, instead of just participating only in the system and thinking that voting for a new president is going to fix things, we actively exit and opt out of the system and start pulling not only our moral support, but our money, our time, our energy away from them, building this next stage of humanity. Not so that we can become the masters and the kings and queens of tomorrow, but so that we can create a better world and a better time where people can live free and know that they are the masters of themselves, that they do own themselves, and that they benefit, that we each benefit from respecting each other's self-ownership and respecting the autonomy of each of us as individual, beautiful beings. So in order to create that world, agorism and counter-economics is about creating new systems. We've talked a lot about crypto throughout this conference. Crypto is just one mechanism of counter-economics, and the man who wrote about it, he died in 2004. He never lived to see crypto happen, but he wrote about it, and he knew that these tools were going to happen and that we were going to have ways to start exiting the system. And so, and we're going to talk more about this in just a bit, we are at a brief window, I think, though, where we have tools like crypto and encryption and other things that are providing for showing us what a world in the hands of free people can look like. But we also have things like facial recognition technology, the 5G smart grid, the Internet of Things. Did anybody know in the next year, 2020 going into 2021, in order to fly domestically in the United States of America, you will have to submit to facial recognition technology? Everybody aware of that? That's where we're headed. That's where we're at. It's not some distant, far-off future. And these things, for me, are certain red lines that back in the day I said, if they ever do this, I'm getting the fuck out. I'm coming to those lines very soon. Because I don't see a lot of people taking action in the ways that I think would maybe keep me around. So, a big part of the philosophy of agorism and counter-economics is, again, opting out of the system. So naturally, that lends itself to non-voting, to not participating in that system. I spend a lot of my work. You can look up my name in non-voting. You find lots of videos I've done on talking about the value of community action over voting in politics. And now I find myself in the unique position of running for mayor of Houston. Now, the reason isn't because I've decided I want to be a career politician, I've given up on my anarchist values, or given up on any of the things I've written about and talked about for the last decade. The reason, it's a multi-part answer, but one of them I will say is the lack of action that I see in the world, in my own community in Houston, in the anarchist movement, in the truther movement, in the crypto movement. I don't know how many of us are truly serious about being free. And I say that with all the respect in the world because I recognize that we all have different living situations. We all have different financial situations. The one thing that unites us here is that we want to come talk about crazy things and be around cool people for a weekend, right? We don't agree about all the details, but we're here to have a good time and explore ideas that we know out there are not necessarily welcomed. But beyond that, we all come from different backgrounds. We're going to go home to different places, different experiences. And so I understand that. But when I talk about agorism and I talk about non-voting, the idea is not vote and then do nothing. The idea is that the only way we can actively create change is we have to pull our support from that system and simultaneously build new systems and support new systems to exit from that state. And I do believe this is a generational change, as Samuel Konkin talked about, seeing this happen in stages. So I'm not giving up on thinking that it's going to happen. The change I fight for, I honestly don't know if I will even ever live to see at the rate the state is growing. But I think it's damn sure worth trying and doing something. Unfortunately, I honestly don't see too many people who are actually serious about that. And again, we all come from different backgrounds, right? I know that we're all not necessarily aiming at the same goal. For me, what I've found is the only way I feel like I can be free in this world, because there are some days where it's literally this fucking crushing feeling that I have to live in this world, that we're being lied to on such a mass scale, and that people cannot see it, and that people like Ross are locked up, and that people are just getting fucked over in the States. I mean, sometimes it's so much, and I just don't even want to be here. And so I have to find some way to, of course, it goes back to the message of the conscious resistance, finding that peace inside as well, right? And obviously that's a part of it. But we can't very well find our inner peace if every day the physical world is crushing down on us. And it's becoming increasingly invasive as time goes on. I do think we need to hold on to that heart center as we take these physical manifestations on. But it's a lot to take on and to realize that the situation we're in. And I'm just not content with personally finding a house in the city or a house in the suburbs and knowing these things, but just going on and being dependent on the grocery store and being dependent on these big companies and just like living my life like a fucking consumer, like that's a mindless zombie. But okay, well, I know what's going on. That's not enough. I need to live as close to my values as possible. And for me, as I've talked about for the last few years, that in 2020, my plan has been to launch an intentional community, to build this, to create. And I've spent the last couple of years traveling more, and I've been down to Costa Rica and seen successful communities that are using ideas like permaculture and decentralized values. They might not call themselves anarchists, but they're living this life already. And they're 95% off the grid. They've got internet, they got power, but it's all solar. They're growing all their own food. They're using permaculture, and they're living in a fucking paradise. And I'm like, dude, why am I not doing this already? This is possible. I don't know if it's possible inside the border of the United States. I don't know if we'll find that freedom there. I'm not saying we give up and leave, but what I'm building for in the future is what I call the counter-economic underground railroad. I think that there realistically might come a time and a place where it won't be safe, or, if as we're going to get into in a moment, as we've heard throughout this talk, this event, the social credit score is coming to the United States, and it's already here in soft ways. We already have different mechanisms which effectively serve that same purpose. But I do think that what we see in China will happen here, where Americans are denied eventually because you said the wrong thing on Facebook, or because you have antisocial behavior, or you attended a rally when you were 15 and now your social credit score is down, and your buddies say, I'm sorry, man, I can't come see you this weekend because, dude, you're going to bring my score down. I'm sorry. And before we know it, we become further and further isolated. We lose all those privileges. I think this is a realistic thing. It's not, I'd say, too far off, and that does worry me. And part of that is the 5G smart grid, the Internet of Things, like all these, again, the balance of technology. The beautiful side, can crypto adoption happen quick enough before this other side is going up and created? So I think these are things we need to worry about. And in that situation, I started to think, how do we opt out? How do we create new systems if they're scanning your face everywhere you go? How do you work under the table if everything has become digitized and then there's the, FedCoin or Libra or whatever they end up using, right? And that's the only allowable currency. What are people willing to do? And this is actually part of a new book that I'm writing that'll be coming out in December. It's called Counter Economics: How to Opt Out of the Technocratic State. And, the whole idea, what I've been realizing is there's some formula that I'm trying to put my finger on that essentially is a way for us to understand what does freedom mean to you as an individual? What does that look like? For me, like I said, it's land. It's growing most, if not all of my own food, being in a community of people, teaching these ideas, doing workshops, documenting the whole process, showing people this shit's possible. That's what it looks like for me. So figure out what it means to you, and then ask yourself, how much are you willing to do to get that? What is your level of sacrifice versus, you know, you want this goal, but what are you willing to do to get it? Are you willing to be uncomfortable? Are you willing to give up things? Are you willing to rearrange your life? And that answer is all up to you, and it's not for me or anyone else to judge. But I do think that's where the answer lies. Some of us are comfortable just talking about these things on YouTube. We're not realizing that the things that we're talking and watching every day on YouTube, it's more than just conspiratainment, infotainment. It's a reality that if we do nothing about, is only going to get worse. So again, I decided to run for mayor of Houston because despite believing in agorism, yeah, it's interesting how people applaud me that I'm running for mayor and they didn't do anything before. It's like, I think the things I was doing before are still the answer. In fact, I decided to infect their system for 6 months. I got 50 days left. And look, let me just tell you this, and I advise everybody not to necessarily to run for office, but find simple ways to hijack their system like this. Derek Bros, the activist, the journalist, the YouTuber, has been in Houston for a decade, been very active. I've been covered by, some of my work's been covered on local news and things like that, but for the most part, I'm just the crazy local conspiracy theorist, is, you know, how they have referred to me at certain times. But I have, you know, I've done a lot of work. But all of a sudden, you put this title next to my name, candidate for mayor. Last week, I spoke at a high school. The week before that, I spoke at a retirement community. I'm getting invited to Democratic forums, Republican forums, Latino forums, Black forums. I'm speaking in the poor neighborhoods, the rich neighborhoods. They're all reaching out because now I'm a part of this show, this shit show, right? There's 12 people who are running, myself among them. But of course, the media tells everybody, here are the 5 candidates running for office. I've had 8 different forums try to keep me out because, oh, they create whatever bullshit criteria they can to keep only those 5 candidates in there. Oh, well, you haven't formally served in office and you haven't raised $100,000, so, you know, you're not a part of our group. Well, what do? I just post it publicly. Hey, everybody, here's another group who says that you don't deserve to hear what's going on. And let me tell you, people are fucking listening. People are listening in Houston. I'm hijacking the signal of the 4th largest city in the country for 6 months. People keep asking me, well, what are you going to do if you win? I'm going to freak the fuck out. And then I'm going to call every one of you brilliant people that I know and say, get to Houston. We're about to change this city. Now, I don't think it's a realistic possibility, but that's what I would do. You know, again, I mean, we're getting local media coverage. We're getting invited to all these things. I'm running on a platform, you know, in Houston local politics, there's no parties. So that's another reason. I wouldn't have done it any other ways if I had to say, like, all right, I'm with this party, that party. So there's no party affiliation. It's obvious which of these establishment politicians are with the Democrats. The current mayor was endorsed by Obama in 2015. The other guy running donated $750,000 to Trump. You know, it's pretty clear where they stand, right? So I get, though, for the last year, I think some of you guys have seen my YouTube videos on 5G, going to city council and talking shit to these people and educating them and trying to wake people up. Yeah, thank you guys for sharing that. For one reason or another, that first video I did last October has over like 900,000 views, just me yelling at city council members. But so I've been doing that, right? And then I've been doing the journalistic thing. Okay, the mayor's going to be at this event. I'm going to go there and put a camera in his face and ask him the questions. I've interviewed the CEO of Verizon. I've interviewed the mayor of Houston. I've interviewed Dr. Martin Paul of Washington State University on the health concerns. I've interviewed attorneys with the ACLU of Northern California about the privacy concerns. I've been doing my fucking homework on this, and I've been putting it in their face and making them talk about it. But they run away from me. They try to knock my camera down. They tell me my time's up at city council. I got sick of it, and it started out as a joke. You know, this mayor really thinks he's something. Somebody should run for the nobodies. And then from that joke, Derek Bros for mayor. And so I decided, though, if I'm going to do this, it's not going to be a joke campaign. It's not going to be Vermin Supreme with a boot on my head. It's going to be that I'm going to take it serious enough that I'm going to run it. When people come talk to me and ask me questions, I actually have something to say. And of course, for me, I try to do it in the least statist way possible. Everything I'm talking about, from ending the drug war, is just getting the government out of the way. Ending the drug war, saying that I would stand against mandatory vaccinations. And it's funny, that one really throws people off. But I just tell them, I'm just being principled and consistent all the way across the board. I do believe you own yourself, your body, your choice, right? Bodily autonomy. So you should be able to smoke weed if you want, and you should be able to decide what goes in your body, and government shouldn't have that right. And again, people are listening. People are listening. They didn't know they cared about self-ownership. I never would have been able to speak at the what is it called? Shady Acres, or one of these kind of names, like some retirement community where these nice older folks told me that their average age is 84, and they have some people who are 104, and they have some of those young folks in their late 60s there too. And this is just this huge retirement community. They got their own bank, they got their own, you know, pharmacy there. 200 of them, and I'm talking to them about decriminalizing cannabis and why they own themselves and why 5G, they should be concerned about it. Again, I was never invited to speak to any of these people. Last week I'm speaking to a high school, which honestly I went as sort of a report because these kids are definitely heavily indoctrinated. They're definitely smart. This particular school I went to is called the Student Climate Caucus. And as they pointed to all the adults in the room and said, yes, you will have to get raise in taxes. Yes, you will pay a lot more taxes, but it's because if we do nothing, the world's going to end in 12 years. And this is what these kids are out there saying. So they invited the candidates to come speak to them for 5 minutes. I was like, holy crap, I get to speak to some junior high and high school kids for 5 minutes? Fuck yeah, I'm doing that. And I talked to them about decentralization. I talked to them about permaculture, and I asked them to respect the tradition of individual liberty when they start pursuing their solutions and to think about these ideas and also thank them because they were obviously intelligent. They obviously could learn and recite facts and think, but I don't think they'd quite been able to question the adults around them and their own intentions and their own purposes. So yeah, it's just been an interesting experience, and I don't think this is the perfect answer for everybody. Honestly, I don't think everyone could do what I'm doing, namely because I have a history of being involved in Houston, so it's not like I'm just coming out of nowhere. People have seen me around being involved in the community in different ways. I have a record to point to of like, look, I've confronted this police officer, I've confronted this mayor, I've done this, I've been out here exposing this. And the other thing is now some of the other candidates are actually trying to steal my ideas, or steal the ideas. They're just repeating the things. All of a sudden, they're all talking about corruption. All of a sudden, they're all saying at least one of the other candidates stole my idea of saying that one of the platforms I'm running on is that we should take away the power from the mayor. And because he's a dictator. And so I'm the only one saying that, or at least I was. Now there's another candidate saying we should talk about taking the power of the mayor away. So my win is not to become mayor on November 5th. My win is already happening. I'm getting in neighborhoods that I never was before in the last 10 years. I'm talking to normies. I'm going to be when I go home from this, I have 14 events in 14 days. There's going to be 2 televised debates all across the city of Houston. And I'm going to be talking about the things you care about. I'm going to be talking about 5G. I'm going to be talking about self-ownership. I'm going to be talking about why the government shouldn't mandate mandatory vaccinations. I'm going to be talking about ending the drug war and ending all these things. So again, I'm just hijacking their signal. Find ways to hijack the signal. Take some kind of action, because as I said, this is kind of born out of my own frustration with seeing like, well, fuck, it's just happening too quick. I can't just sit here and keep talking on YouTube every day. That's not enough. Like, how can I get more people involved? Because these people aren't the type of folks who are going to come to this conference. They're not the kind of people who are necessarily even going to search for these topics on YouTube. They probably would never come across these ideas. So this is why I said at the panel yesterday for whoever was there, is anybody in this room too good to pass out a flyer? Because we've been doing as simple things, and it's like a political tactic, right? You go door to door, block walking. But why couldn't you have a flyer with information from Mark's work with a link to a video, and just go to door to door because you care about that idea and you want your neighbors to know about it. If we don't talk to the people around us, they are going to continue to be indoctrinated, and when the shit hits the fan, you're going to be surrounded with a bunch of people who think the government is the answer and think people like you are crazy. And that's going to be a lot harder to deal with if we haven't made the efforts to establish connections with the people around us. And I myself am guilty of this. Like I said, I could have been hitting up all these neighborhoods before the campaign. I'm frustrated with myself that it took for me to do this to finally go make more of an effort. I feel like I was making some effort, put in some time, but why couldn't I hit that neighborhood up before? Why didn't I think about that? So it's been teaching me a lot. And like I said, this is a 6-month experiment. This is not something you're ever going to see me do again. And people are listening. People are coming to us from the other campaigns and saying, we like what you're talking about. They don't want their guys to know, though. So I'm like, okay, well, come over with us. Talk about it. Help us spread these ideas. And I'm making it clear to people, don't put your hopes in me, because when this is over, whether or not I won the election or not, if more people are talking about this, that means we help at least plant those seeds. I'm not saying they're going to be fully woke people and they're going to be understanding natural law and anarchism, but maybe they're on the beginning of their journey now of starting to question the systems around them. Because I'm showing them, look, the local media interviewed me and then they refused to put it on TV. Hey, this guy said that I can't come in his thing because I don't have $100,000. I'm exposing, and this is how the corruption happens. Everybody's worried about the federal government. It happens in your neighborhood group. It happens in your local civic organization. This is how they keep these people in a bubble. So when they invite them to, hey, come to your neighborhood forum, we're inviting all the mayoral candidates, and there's only 5 people there. Those 5 people who are just more of the same BS. That's how they keep people, and that's just in the political world. It works so many other ways, but it's happening in your backyard. It's not just the far away big things. It's right in our backyards. And that's where I think we need to focus more of our action and get established locally. We can't rely on social media, particularly because I sort of touched on the 5G smart grid, the Internet of Things. I think you guys are probably very aware of some of the concerns. Again, it's a tool. I do think that there's all kinds of ways we could say, well, with 5G, healthcare is going to be this, and they're going to have these benefits, and those are all real. There's definitely benefits to these ideas, but the downsides are things that really scare the shit out of me. You know, I don't think it's like they're building it in Houston. This is why I started getting focused. Houston was one of the first rollout cities of 5G, and the more I've learned about it, the more I've seen that it's just another government corporate power grab. You know, even if you don't buy the health concerns, if you care at all about like the little bit of freedoms we got, the FCC and the big wireless, the telecom lobby known as the CTIA, partnered with them to basically say that cities and states and municipalities and counties have no say in what this 5G rollout. You can't decide how much to charge it. You have to approve it within 90 days. The only thing you can argue is you think it's ugly, and they'll turn it into a palm tree. You know, you can't argue it on health grounds. So it's, and in Texas, there's also a state law. And this is what's happening in a lot of places. You got the federal government, Trump partnering with them. I mean, the freaking thing's ran by a former Verizon lawyer. What else do you need to know? And then on the local level, the state level, and then down to the local level where I'm at in Houston, you got like the current mayor. He's the 5G wireless champion. He was given an award for this by the telecom lobby. You can't make this shit up. So it's happening from top to bottom. And so more, even if you don't buy the health concerns, you don't think 5G is going to be, you know, the mind control, whatever. I know people have all kinds of theories. At the very least, it's another usurpation of power from, you know, local level. And that's about all we got left, is trying to fight things locally. So obviously, this is not being reported anywhere. They're making any, but the New York Times said people who are concerned about 5G are buying into Russian propaganda. Those Russians, they want us to be worried about GMOs. They want us to be worried about 5G. I don't know. Sometimes they seem friendly. But yeah, so I know, again, where am I on time? 5 minutes? Cool. All right, yeah, so I think I've said most of really what I wanted to say. You know, this, I just will mention two things. So I'm going to be putting out a documentary on 5G at the end of this month. If you follow my channel, The Conscious Resistance, it's going to be a history of the FCC corruption, looking at the individual aspects of 5G and EMF in general. Because just a note, for those who are unaware, if you're totally blind on this area, I understand it was something I stayed away from for a long time, because if you ever even suggest that cell phones are linked to cancer, you're called a conspiracy theorist. And I learned that early when I started to research this. I could see that. Well, guess what? About 2 weeks ago, the Chicago Tribune did an independent investigation specifically replicating the testing models from the FCC, and they tested iPhones and all kinds of other Samsungs. iPhone 7 particularly is emitting 200 times the legal limit of radiation at the FCC. And the other thing about that, those limits were made in 1996 with the Telecommunications Act, and there are studies that already show at those legal levels that there are still health problems. So you got health problems at the legal limit. This new Chicago Tribune shows the iPhone 7 and others are 200 times past that. And that's probably what you got in your pocket right now. So the thing about it is 5G is not just 5G itself. We're learning more and more that, and there was a really awesome article came out from The Nation in 2018. It's called How Big Wireless Convinced Us That Cell Phones Are Safe. Project Censored called it the top 8 censored story of 2018. And they compared it to big tobacco. You know, that there's trillions of dollars going to this to keep people from questioning the realities that we're surrounding ourselves with EMF devices all the time. You know, electromagnetic fields and electromagnetic radiation coming from all these devices all the time. And the 5G smart grid is only going to increase that because they're using millimeter waves. It travels very, very small distances, so they have to install it. Some estimates 200 to 500 feet. So you're talking every other. In Houston, where they're putting it, there's already small cells right outside of middle schools. And so there's some neighborhoods that are actually starting to wake up to this. But like I said, I mean, the deal's already been done. You know, there's people I know who are literally physically trying to tear these things down now. How many of you are going to do that? How many of you actually feel, what's your level of freedom versus, you know, your level of action? That's what you need to figure out. What are you willing to do to have this freedom? Find out what your goal of freedom looks like. Find out what that means to you, and it's going to be different for all of us, and that's okay as long as we're not infringing on each other's vision and we're not causing harm or violence. Find what that is. Start setting goals towards that. And how uncomfortable are you willing to make yourself to attain that? Because it's going to involve more than just sitting on YouTube, sitting on Instagram, sitting on Facebook, sitting comfortably in our rooms. It's going to involve some level of action, both internal and physical. I'm going to leave you guys with a positive affirmation. First, just say thank you guys for your time. I appreciate everybody coming here, trying to learn something, do something that matters. So just repeat after me, if you will. We're going to do this one a couple times. This is brand new. We'll do this, but it's a tribute to Mr. John Trudell. So just repeat after me. We are power. We are power. We are power. We have so much power within us. We're made of the earth. We're made of the soil. We're made of the heavens. We have everything within us to do this. But I'm telling you, brothers and sisters, it's going to take effort. It's going to take action. And it's not always going to be easy. And it's going to be frustrating. It's going to be long. And again, we might not see the end result of our work in this generation. But is there anything else more important than trying to make the world a better place and fix what's happened before us? I can't think of anything else. And I'm glad to be on this journey with you guys. Thank you so much.
Derek Bros, everyone. Jesus fucking Christ. All right, we have something very special for you guys planned for this finale of the main event. We're going to have our keynote speaker coming up soon, giving a speech that I personally requested from him. So he prepared the shit just for me, and I'm pretty stoked about that. And then after that, we're going to reveal a preliminary cut of a documentary, full-length feature-length documentary film that we've been working on pretty much since we got back from Anarchapulco this year. So it's almost done. It's ready to go, and that'll be after the speech tonight. We're going to get a few things set up, and then we're going to get going with the finale. Stick around.